Good evening and welcome to the May 2nd, 2017 meeting of the Sammamish City Council. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor Don Gerand.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Bob Keller.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Hornish.
Present.
Councilmember Kathy Huckabee. Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
Present.
Councilmember Christy Malchow.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Odell.
Here.
And Councilmember Huckabee is excused for personal reasons. Councilmember Odell, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And are there any items to be taken off the consent agenda?
Yeah, hold on just a second.
Yes, I'd like to remove item number 7, please.
Item number 7.
I've got one too, but I'm trying to flip to it.
I think that's
Hold on.
already off.
I thought it was removed.
I think it's off already.
Not really.
Nope, it's still in, so we can put that first thing in new business.
Regular meeting.
We could, or I would put it under unfinished business since we've already had discussions on that topic.
Okay,
Yeah, I
same,
would too.
same
Number-
thing.
Same order.
Item number 3.
Item number 3, contract Louis Thompson slide. We can put that under unfinished business also, can't we? So we'll put that, we'll take 3 first and then 7. Is that all? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote of 6-0, the agenda is approved. Next, we have presentations and proclamations. Mr. City Manager, are there any?
No, we do not have any tonight.
Okay. Student liaison reports? Oh, there he is. Come on up, Tyler.
Good evening to the council. My name is Tyler Zingaglia. I'm with Eastlake High School. So at the last council meeting a couple months ago, I talked about how Eastlake was running our annual Wolf Strong Week. So this is a week that united our school as a whole and sort of motivated everyone to keep going and push throughout the rest of the year as we get close to the end of the school year. So we had a focus throughout the week on lots of sports that we had, so soccer, baseball, tennis, lacrosse, as well as really highlighted our improv team. We even had a tailgate one of the days. And we did some things to highlight students that might not usually feel recognized at our school. So we had an art walk, which featured tons of great talent. We had a Chipotle fundraiser that got money for Eastlake Boosters. We had Stu Cabe come to our school, who's a great motivational speaker and got everyone motivated for the week. Recognized people at an assembly at the end of the week and just showed them that we really appreciate them at our school. And again, motivated kids for the rest of the school year. So we look forward to pushing through these last couple of months and getting to the end of the school year. And also, from all high schoolers and everyone, thank you for bringing Chipotle to Sammamish. 'Cause that is such a gift, honestly. It's amazing. So. Yeah, well,
Now
It's
we can
kinda
just bring in Ace.
Yeah, it's a zoo there at lunchtime.
it is, babe. It's the best place ever. I mean,
Yeah. So your motivational speaker motivated you for the week.
and yeah, more than the week. Yeah.
Oh,
So his
okay.
name was Stu Cave. He talked a lot about just the simple things at our school and really got us to focus on parts of our school that aren't usually recognized. So just really highlighted all the people that make our school special.
Good. And aren't you going to thank us for the cookie, too, from the Metropolitan Market?
Hey, the cookies are great too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Tyler.
you so much.
Okay. Next on the agenda is public comment. And this is an opportunity for the public to address the council. 3-minute limit per person or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. And please be aware, council meetings are videotaped and available to the public. So if you step up here, give your name and address. And the first one is Amanda, I forgot your last name.
Harpel Franz.
Harpel France and Michael Schneider.
Thank you.
So my name is Amanda Harpel-Franz, and I am a case manager, social worker from HopeLink nonprofit agency on the east side. And I work with families in a family development program for 2 years, trying to help families increase their housing stability and their income stability, especially to move out of poverty.
And I'm Michael Schneider. I'm a resident here in Sammamish at 22130 Northeast 13th Place. And I'm on the board of directors of Imagine Housing, a low-income charity that serves the east side.
And I did want to mention my address because I just realized I didn't say it. It's 16725 Cleveland Street, Redmond, but I serve families. I go out to different homes within Sammamish, Issaquah, Redmond, and Bellevue.
Well, thank you for proclaiming April 15th to the 22nd as Affordable Housing Week, and for your recognition of the urgent need for affordable homes in Sammamish and across the east side. Too many families in our region are struggling just to stay housed, and too many students in our classrooms do not have a stable place to call home. We can't expect our children to be the next generation of innovative leaders when we don't allow them the basic resources to learn, grow, and thrive. Our goals for Affordable Housing Week are not only to call attention to the level of need, but also to highlight policy solutions and the important work that is currently being done to make a difference. For example, cities around the region are implementing mandatory affordability, seeking new revenue sources, engaging the business community in partnerships, and exploring other policy tools to increase affordability and housing options so that people who work here can live, thrive, and retire in their communities. Imagine Housing currently has 13 properties in 6 East Side cities, including one in Sammamish, and is aggressively exploring ways to create more housing to meet the growing need despite very limited public resources.
We would like to invite you to attend some of the events that we have planned to learn about both the people we serve as well as the policy tools you can use to be a part of the solution. The handout is coming right now. We also challenge you to visit some of the East Side communities that serve affordable housing and shelters and get to know the people who stay there and who work there. Imagine Housing or HopeLink staff would be happy to assist with this, and we'd be happy to answer questions you might have. Beyond the week, we hope that you will continue to support affordable homes with all the tools available to you. We do appreciate the time that you guys have given us tonight, and I did want to share one example of how your support of affordable housing makes a huge difference in the lives of families. I've changed the names of this family just so that they're not identifiable. But Caleb and Alyssa enrolled in the Family Development Program, Case Management Program, in March of 2016. I was their case manager. At enrollment, they were living in their car with their then 3-month-old and their 2-year-old. Neither adult has ever lived in housing where they were the main provider, so neither one had had housing before. Caleb reports being homeless even as a young child, even as a teen, living off and on friends' couches or on the street. Neither client was employed coming into the Family Development Program, only receiving TANF of about $500 a month. Caleb and Alyssa shared initially that they needed help finding stable housing to get into, getting connected with other social service supports, having help with transportation reimbursement costs because of Caleb's high amount of medical appointments that he had, and to be able to raise their income. Both clients appeared physically and emotionally exhausted for multiple months in case management, but then something began to change with their hope and their engagement with their future. In just 6 months, they have been able to get into permanent housing, and they actually got into permanent housing at one of our HopeLink Bellevue locations after I helped them be able to apply for different types of housing. 6 months is actually a very short time. Most of the families that we work with, it's a year plus just to get into housing. So imagining that family and with 2 tiny little kids if they hadn't gotten into housing before then. We've continued to try to reduce their debt and impact their credit report. We've gone over budgeting and spending to ensure that Alyssa's now working full-time. She was able to get into a management position at her work with the help of being able to get her driver's license. Caleb has also now started a business online. So both of them have a new confidence and hope with the housing that they have. They continue in the case management they're in, and both clients share that they feel proud of being able to provide more for their families. Caleb remembers his family growing up involved in gangs and not having a stable upbringing. So for him, he's now able to focus on his health as well with his chemo treatments as well as his mental health stability. And now they both speak positively now about their future and being able to get married hopefully next year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And we do recognize that we have a affordable housing gap in Sammamish. In the town center, we require 10% affordable.
Yes.
But that isn't going to do the whole thing. We do have the Habitat for Humanity project.
Yep.
But we need more affordable and more housing for all income and economic and social sectors.
Absolutely. I think especially to the flyer that was handed out that talks about a single parent must earn $27.21. I would say most of the people that I work with, they're lucky if they make $11 an hour, and many of them are single parents. So I agree
Right.
with you, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Next is Casey Thompson, followed by George Toski.
Hi, I'm Casey Thompson. I live in Laurie Estates, and I am representing that neighborhood. And
I'm Dennis Malone. I live at 19512 Southeast 21st Street, so Sammamish Woods, right next door to Laurie Estates.
okay, I'm at 19818 Southeast 19th Street. I didn't realize I needed to get my address. So I sent over a PowerPoint earlier today for you guys to look at. We're talking about the Parker Platte proposed development of 30 homes. Yes, thank you. That's exactly it. There's the address. Oh, is there a clicker? Oh, thank you. So nice. I haven't done this in years, so let's see if we can not use all my time clicking. I don't even know where the button is. Okay, yeah. Yep. Okay, there we go. So there's a Google Earth map of the two properties that are proposed for development. We are just want to communicate that as neighbors, we feel like this is a very special property. There's a home that was built there in 1916, the original Rainey family estate, so this is going back a long way, and lots of old growth trees, wildlife, so the neighborhood appreciates the land. I'm still trying to click it. There we go. Lots of questions there about what's going on and with this property in terms of the trees, the water management, the erosion and overlay. I'm going to skip forward, though, a little bit to this is our main question tonight, I think, is the pilot program. Is how does this development align with the city's intention to try out subdivisions in the no disturbance area in a limited way? So 30 homes, R6 development on 7.5 acres. It's going to be clear cut, 5,000 square foot lots. We're just very concerned about water management, trees, if this really fits with the pilot program, and if the pilot program has already been finished, which I heard from someone that it might be, then how would this development even be moving forward? These are all things I think we need to check out. That's a pileated woodpecker in my backyard from last summer. There was also bears walking down the street that a neighbor got a picture of the other day. There's no wildlife corridor right now. That circle on the upper left shows where the property is, and Dennis has a better close-up map showing how much of the land is in the erosion landslide hazard area. Again, another map showing that it being in the environmentally sensitive area. And another issue
Can
is...
you go back a second and see where is it on that map, on this next map?
Oh, if I know how to go back, I'd be happy to.
Well, thank you.
So the next one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to juxtapose it with this one that you've just received.
Yeah, his is the better one to look at
Okay.
because he has it
All right,
really
I
up
see it. Thank you.
close.
Thank you.
Yeah, the red square there shows the two pieces of property. There's a 5-acre and a 10-acre, and you can see that the 10-acre section is almost 100% in the landslide risk area and the erosion risk area.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's better. And then we are proposing that the developer need to hire approved professionals, experts by the city, and maybe the city hire them, the developer pay for them. But right now, some neighbors are concerned that several trees on their private property have been tagged as part of the developer's tree survey, and so they feel concern about that. I want to thank you all so much. I think that was my beep, my time up, right?
Well, actually, there were two of you, so don't rush through.
Oh, okay.
You don't know how to go back, though, do you?
Well, I think Dennis can work it,
Okay.
whatever he wants
Backwards.
to talk about, yeah.
Is that backwards or forwards?
That's backwards.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about the notification.
Okay. Yeah, we also, a minor point, we didn't get the 21-day advance notification from the developer for the first meeting that they want to hold. It came in about 19 days, so they didn't make the advance notice. Again, we have lots of concern about particularly the old growth trees, and also that there's not anybody that the city is responsible for doing the counting of the trees and the inspection of which trees are getting cut down, and it kind of feels like the fox guarding the hen house, asking the developer to have their own tree expert go out and tag trees and then tell you how many they cut down afterwards.
Well, nothing will get cut down without the permit, right, Mr. City Manager?
Correct. And I will point out that we have not yet received a permit application for this particular
They're supposed to be
development.
filing on the 21st, I believe.
But that's only if the neighborhood meeting happens on the 17th.
Yeah, so
Right. So if they have not met the requirements for the neighborhood meetings, it will not proceed until they meet the requirements that the city has laid out.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager,
Yes.
what's the underlying zoning for this area?
I believe it is R4 and R6.
Okay, and this is in the landslide hazard area?
Correct.
Okay, I thought that the pilot programs were very limited. Is this one of them?
This may not qualify as a pilot program. We would have to actually look at the application in and of itself, and they would have to meet all the requirements as set forth by code.
Right, because by the time we got through with the pilot programs and the CAO, effectively the zoning became R1, in fact.
Yeah. Councilmember Malchow?
So, well, that was one of my questions. I was on the pilot program. The second was on the notification. What exactly does our city code say? I know it's 21 days, but is that 21 days on postmark? I mean, they didn't receive it within the 21 days. They're saying they received it 19 days out. Does that meet code or not?
I don't believe it does.
Okay.
However, I will double check with the actual code if it has to be postmarked, but the intent is 21 days ahead of notice.
Receipt.
Receipt.
And then one final question. So some of the folks, including Casey, were in at council office hours today and noted that some trees have been tagged on private property, and just wanting reassurance that the city will make sure that the trees that are tagged are within the parcel that's being,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. We have noticed some developments as they go forward. It's sometimes people or arborists will stray onto another person's property, and they technically shouldn't be even on that individual's property without their permission.
Yeah, one of our neighbors actually observed them coming onto her property to tag the trees, and she asked them, and she was told that they were told that they needed to go outside the boundaries.
Well,
Why that makes sense, I don't know, but
They-
that's
they
a little bit of
technically-
hearsay.
Yeah, technically, they can't do that without somebody's permission.
Councilmember Valderrama?
Yeah, in my case, they need permission from the dog. That said, and I think Councilmember Odell has some good points on it. I'm curious, City Manager, if I thought that the pilot program had already had the applications that filled the quotas for that, and they were in the north. So the ones that had filled those were in the north. So I didn't know if there were any left over, unless somebody dropped out.
I honestly need to do some checking on that to
Okay.
find out if there are any more.
Could we get an update? I
Sure.
mean, that'd be an
Sure.
action item.
We
yeah.
can- we'd be
On the
happy
PAC
to do
program,
that.
yeah.
Which ones are open? Thank you.
Good. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Okay, next is George Toski, followed by Al Jones.
Good evening. My name is George Toski, 2727 East Lake Sammamish Parkway, Northeast. I am the president of SHOW, and I'm here to representing SHOW to speak about the processing of the SSDP for Segment 2B of the East Lake Sammamish Trail. Firstly, SHOW thanks Lyman Howard for recommending and the council for terminating the interlocal agreement with King County about the development of the processing for the trail. Next, SHOW thanks Lindsay Osbolt for accumulating all of the comments, public comments, and putting them into PDF files. Some of them are like 800 pages long, so that they could be read by people that may be interested other than whether or not your own comment got into the public comment. And then the comments were all posted on the city's website. I was so overwhelmed by the transparency of this that I actually read all of the comments personally. There were, I counted, I don't hold me to these numbers, it's a lot of comments to read. I counted 965 comments. There were 720 comments made by bicycle enthusiasts who said, just build the trail. You know, who cares about the environment or whatever else? They didn't say that. They were nice about it. There was two of them that called us greedy bastards down by the lake. But anyway, they were mostly very nice comments. And of the remaining comments, there were, I counted 75 duplicates, individuals who had typical, you know, more than one meeting. One lady had 10. And sometimes it'd just be repeat comments that came in however they got there. So I estimate that there was 175 individuals and couples who made comments to the city about the permit. And of those, there was only a couple that called the county an evil bully. But so most of those comments were very professional and very easy to read. And then I couldn't believe, I really couldn't believe how hard the staff worked to provide a letter back to the county pointing out the deficiencies and the rules that were, the Sammamish regulations that were being broken. It was totally unbelievable. The transparency that the city has done with processing of this permit is totally outstanding and completely different from the non-transparency we got in the north section where I live and in the south section where I had the unfortunate responsibility of appearing before the Shoreline Hearing Board to try to beat back some of the things that they were, the offenses that the county was making down there. So I congratulate Lyman Howard, the council, Lindsay Oswald, and the entire staff for working really hard to get this trail done right. This trail can be built, and SHOW has never been against the trail. It can be built. All they need to do is to put it right down the middle of the train tracks and the interim trail, and keep it, narrow it down when you're going through environmentally sensitive area, and it's just going to be beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. I hope our video recording is working.
Really? For posterity's sake.
So we can mail it to the county, too.
Al?
My name is Al Jones. I live at 3211 239th Avenue Southeast, and that's in the recently annexed area. And I just wanted to stop by the council and share how positively I feel about how your Public Works Department treated me. I called on a Friday afternoon to advise the city that there was some relatively serious erosion along a culvert that adjoins my property. The nice lady that I talked to that took the message on Friday afternoon, her first question was, is it an emergency? Do we need to put it on the agenda for the weekend staff? My answer to that was no. First thing Monday morning, before I was even out of bed, I had a call back from the Public Works folks at 8 o'clock in the morning. And on Tuesday, I explained the problem, and on Tuesday, a gentleman from Public Works visited me, knocked on the door, said, I'm here to take a look. He looked at it, told me what they were going to do. On Thursday, the crew was there, regraded the whole area, rolled it with the pressure roller, and had laid down new larger gauge rocks to limit the erosion. So the whole process took less than 10 days. And that so blew me away after where I live being in the area of, at best, benign neglect from the county for so long that I thought I'd stop by tonight and give Public Works a little attaboy.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Again, I hope the video's working.
Yeah.
Yes. And so you're now officially in the city, right?
I am.
So you can use Sammamish now instead of Issaquah for your mailing address.
No, I had to keep the Issaquah mailing address.
Actually, you can keep the zip code, but you could put Sammamish.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll get there.
And thank you very much for your comments. We will pass those along.
By the way, Mr. City Manager, on 228th and Southeast 4th, right on the southwest corner, there's a pothole.
Thank you very much.
Let's see how long it takes. Jeffrey Weems. Followed by Mr. Tobiasen, I think.
Good evening, council members. Jeffrey Weems, 941 206th Place, Northeast Sammamish, Washington. You may recall that last year our group from 206th Place met with you several times to discuss the Inglewood Stormwater Ordinance and the restrictions it placed on our properties and our vacant lots that we own. I am here now because as instructed by the city manager and the mayor last year, we have reached out again to the Public Works Department and found that now that we're in the second quarter, they have added the Inglewood Stormwater Ordinance study and process to look at possible revisions to make the Inglewood Ordinance more consistent with the rest of the city. That is an official work item now, and we thank the council for that. Also thank Tawny and Steve and Cheryl for making that happen. I think what I'm looking forward to, so we've been working on this for a little over a year now. One of the things I'm looking forward to is we have soil studies and engineering studies that were done when our houses were built, and also some recent studies for some new houses that were built in the area. And the geology looks very positive for the new low impact development that is a key part of the stormwater code that you all will recall was adopted on January 1st. So there's sort of a new set of guidelines and rules that the stormwater folks are operating under in terms of designing a system of review and what the required procedures are for doing development, and it would allow Inglewood to come into alignment with the rest of the granted steep areas and some landslide hazard drainage areas, but it would be applied consistently across the city so that we wouldn't have a special ordinance that was singling out Inglewood. Another good thing about this is having observed some of the deliberations last year about in Tamarack, which is another relative, has a steep slope area, looking at the deliberations about how would the city-provided infrastructure be paid for in Tamarack. And I know that probably most of you recall that the Tamarack folks and the Public Works folks have been before you talking about who should pay for this, to how extensive should the system be. And one of the really good things about looking at the low impact development and the local geology is that rather than requiring city-funded, designed and maintained infrastructure, as is the case in some places that's required, but by not requiring that in places that are appropriate for LID, the city removes themselves from the process of trying to provide centralized infrastructure, and it's handled more locally as described in the LID code. So it's a win for the property owners in that they get to make use of their property as appropriate under the codes, and it's a win for the city in that the city is not trying to build an extensive centralized stormwater infrastructure across all of Inglewood Hill. So we look forward to, I guess the process will start with Tawny is organizing a meeting for Inglewood homeowners that'll be publicized. It's going to be at the end of this month, and that'll be the kickoff, and then there will be the usual process of going before the Planning Commission a couple of times to have some study and working groups based on the feedback that they get from the property owners and stakeholders. And then hopefully sometime towards the very end of the year, before Dawn is gone, we'll be back with a Planning Commission recommendation on whatever this process yields in terms of a revision of that Inglewood ordinance. And that's all I have to say.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that perhaps the correct schedule, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, I believe he represented the schedule well. We're moving forward. I hope that it will be done by the end of the year, but we're making every effort.
Good. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Gary Tobias in 1100 206th Avenue Northeast, Inglewood. I'm also a homeowner in the Inglewood neighborhood area, and I'm just here to say I appreciate the Public Works adding the Inglewood stormwater ordinance to an official work item for 2017. I appreciate it. We worked hard last year to get it in front of you, and I'm glad that it made the work item. As a property owner, it's important to us that city officials listen to our concerns, and it sounds like that's what you're doing. Thank you for adding this to your list.
Great. Thank you, Gary.
I only wish we could do it sooner, but we do move slow.
Lorene McKenna.
Hello, I'm Lorene LaPena. I live at 905 206 Place Northeast. And along with Jeff and Gary, I also want to say thank you. And I'm sure the video is working, right? I want to say thank you also for listening to our concerns last year. And I am also looking forward to the homeowners meeting that Jeff referred to and further work that we can do this year, especially on the low impact development issues. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Okay, next is the consent calendar. And we have payroll for a period ending April 15th, approval of claims for a period ending May 2nd. Item number 2 is the proclamation on Affordable Housing Week. And then we skip to item 4, contract with environmental consulting services for park and recreation with the Watershed Company. Item 5 is the bid award on the 2017 sidewalk repair and ADA ramp retrofit with RRJ Company. Item 6 is bid award for guardrail repair projects, Peterson Brothers. Item 8 is approval of the notes for the April 3rd study session. And item 9 is approval of minutes for the April 18th regular meeting. And I believe the April 3rd recording didn't work out too well, is that right?
That is correct. We had a hardware issue in our system, and it has since been fixed, but we lost most of the audio. So if you're a great lip reader, you might be in better shape than the rest of us.
It could be reinforced by my notes that I take.
Very good.
Move to approve the consents.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. No comment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed by your vote of 6-0. It's approved. Next comes a public hearing. Item number 10, ordinance first reading, amending chapters 21A15, 21A45, 21B15, and 21B45 of the Sammamish Municipal Code pertaining to permanent and temporary signs. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have tonight David Goodman and Deputy Director David Pyle here to walk us through the first reading and public hearing of the sign code. You recall last night we did touch base on this, and we had some comments and questions from council. We are going to endeavor to answer some of those for you tonight, but we fully expect that we won't answer all of the questions that you might have. So this is a multi-night process. So without further ado, let me turn things over.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening again, City Council. Pleasure to be with you. So last night we had our study session on the sign code amendments that we're proposing, and tonight we're going to be holding our first reading and public hearing. Our goals for this discussion include reviewing the context of the sign code update, why we're doing this, and why we did what we did. We're going to respond to some of the questions and concerns that you raised yesterday. We're going to hear from our Planning Commission Chair, who's going to share some thoughts about the conversations that the Planning Commission had over the course of a couple months that led to the code that you're going to review. You will open the public hearing, and then after that, we're going to set some decision points for you looking ahead to next Tuesday's study session.
Wait.
So again, a brief...
When is the decision pending? Can you back that slide?
The actual
Okay.
decision,
May 9th.
for the second reading is scheduled for Tuesday, May 16th. This is going to be a topic of discussion at the study session on May 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So a brief bit of context, both to refresh your memories and for the people in the crowd here. The primary reason that we're before you this evening is in response to the 2015 Supreme Court case of Reed versus the Town of Gilbert, in which case the which ruled that content-based sign regulations are an unconstitutional restriction on free speech. And I'll show in the next slide or two what exactly that means, but this applies specifically to non-commercial speech. So primarily what we're here to do is to revise the code so that it comes into compliance with this ruling. In addition, we've also proposed some other changes that seek to update some already identified issues that the staff has been forced to reckon with over the past couple of years. These include 2 pilot programs that have since expired, a number of confusing and redundant regulations, and also we addressed the lack of enforcement ability that our code enforcement officers have. So we tried to give them a little more teeth to really try to abate some of the more common sign code infractions throughout the city. And by the way, that's Mr. Reed, the successful litigant. So an important point before we get too deep into this is that the decision in Reed versus Gilbert was primarily focused on non-commercial signs, non-commercial speech. And so for that reason, the primary focus of our amendments is on non-commercial speech within the Sammamish Municipal Code. So in that particular case, that has to do with temporary signs, including what were formerly referred to as political signs, community event signs, fundraising signs, things of that nature, as well as the community banner program that's on 228th over here. In addition to that, we also covered a little bit of ground on temporary real estate signs and permanent signs, specifically within the town center. And these amendments are less about the Supreme Court case and more about addressing some issues that have long been known to the staff and that are also have to do with expired programs and confusing regulations, as I mentioned. So just to give an example of what a content-based sign regulation is, this is a little table that summarizes some of the regulations that are in the current Sammamish Municipal Code. So we have signs for temporary political signs, regulations for fundraising signs, and regulations for community event signs. And as you can see, they're slightly different in terms of how big they're allowed to be, where they're allowed to be placed, how tall they're allowed to be, and how long they're allowed to be out, in addition to the type of structure sign that they can be. So this is a textbook example of a content-based sign regulation that was ruled unconstitutional. We are no longer allowed to treat a political sign differently than a fundraising sign solely because it's a political sign or a fundraising sign. So in short, that means that to use a phrase of a colleague, the tools in our toolbox have changed since the ruling. So what we have proposed in place of those content-based regulations is a non-commercial temporary sign table, where we've really tried to keep the spirit of the regulations that were in place beforehand, but present them in such a way that is content neutral, so that doesn't regulate a sign based on whether it's a political sign or a sign advertising an event. So many of the numbers on this table are the same as they were previously, just the categories have changed a little bit. But the goal here was to keep the framework as consistent as possible so that people who have been utilizing temporary signs can continue to do so in much a similar way than they have been. So that's my brief update on context, and now I'd like to briefly respond to some of the questions that were brought up last night. The first is on the prohibition on non-commercial temporary signs in the right-of-way within a 150-foot radius of an intersection. So firstly, I want to say that the question was brought up about the other regulations that prohibit placing temporary signs in medians, roundabouts, and on sidewalks. That prohibition would remain in. That's in addition to the 150-foot radius. And secondly, regarding the visual issue, I also want to clarify that the impetus for this 150-foot radius actually had more to do with safety than it had to do with sign pollution. There was a concern that a great congregation of temporary signs at intersections would cause potential distractions from traffic signs or some other sort of issue related to the high volume of pedestrian-on-pedestrian interaction, pedestrian and vehicle interaction, and vehicle-on-vehicle interaction at those areas. And that is related to the decision of why we came up with a 150-foot radius. It has to do with the fact that for stop signs on streets with 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, the required sight distance for that is 155 feet. So we took that and adapted it to make a bit of a cleaner number, but that was the idea behind that particular distance. In terms of the community banner program, I just also, again, want to clarify our options in responding to the Reed v. Gilbert case. The council has essentially 4 options before it when it comes to revising the community banner program. All come with different amounts of flexibility and concurrently all come with different amounts of potential legal risk. The first option is to continue operating the program as is, which is that use of the program is limited to organizations that have a 501c3 status. The second option is to transfer the program into a government speech, a forum for government speech. This is the option that the Planning Commission recommended. But just to be clear, that essentially means that the city is restricted in using it to promote city events only, and that for a city to co-sponsor an event there has to be essentially a fairly high bar of sponsorship in order for the city to use the banner program in that manner if you were to go ahead and use and restrict the use of the banner program to government speech. And I'm hoping the attorney can clarify or correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But thank you very much. Never went to law school. The third option would be to drop the 501c3 requirement for use of the program, but to open it up to all non-commercial messages, which is essentially, would have you in compliance with the decision, but would open you up to potentially having messages that might not be so welcome. And then the final option, of course, is to terminate the program altogether. So those are the 4 risks, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion on that later. And again, I'm hoping if you have any more complicated questions on that, the attorney can help out. The other issue that was brought up yesterday has to do with the fact that we, in our draft code and in the Planning Commission's recommended code, we took the community banner regulations out of 21A, which is the development regulations for the city as a whole, and moved it solely into 21B, which is the development regulations for town center. Reason being that currently the only city-sponsored banner poles are within town center. And there was a question last night about whether there was any downside to leaving regulations for the community banner program in 21A in the case that the city wanted to open up a new banner program at some later date in a location that's not within town center. There's really no downside to doing that. We could certainly do that. The only downside would be that if some circumstance came to be with the new location that contradicted whatever we put in there now, we would have to go back in and fix it, but not a huge deal. Another thing we wanted to respond to was about the proliferation of real estate signs on the weekends. So we do allow certain types of temporary real estate signs to be in the public right-of-way. So it's less an issue of whether or not those are legal and more of an issue of the fact that we don't do code enforcement on the weekends very often. So someone is less likely to get caught in the act.
I hope our video is not working.
Yeah.
Actually, I have had some discussion with our folks that are responsible for this, and they do get out. But with the weather getting nicer, they're going to get out a lot more on the weekends. So.
Okay.
And then the last issue that was brought up yesterday was on gateway signs, and I'm going to cede the mic to David Pyle, who's going to talk a little bit about that.
Good evening, David Pyle. So with regard to the gateway signs, we're interested in learning more about what the council's interested in here, as the potential in programs ranges from a standalone work item that we could look at in the upcoming year, all the way to a very minor adjustment in the code that would allow for small sort of pendant signs, if you will, to be affixed to an existing street sign or street sign pole. And the range in the program is very diverse in that. Some cities actually have gateway sign programs that are in there that fall under an art program that basically they have changing displays, they have various things that are found at the gateway to the city, and it's managed more in terms of public and community art. Other cities also have programs, and I'm sure we've all seen them, the Adopt a Highway Litter Control Program, for example, that might list a adopting organization that's providing for the resources to keep a section of highway clean. So what we're interested in hearing from you is sort of what the range of interest is here in order to narrow down what we might have as options in terms of amending or editing the code, or even if we need to at all, if it's just a very simple manner of affixing some sort of pendant or some sort of small sign to a sign pole, it could be done through a right-of-way permit. Or not even. At that point, it's a matter of just making sure it's compliant with the city's standards for street signs under the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Do you want input now?
We would hope that you could consider it, think about it for now, and then when we come back on May 9th, we could have a more complete discussion on it.
Tom, you have a comment now?
Well, I had a question regarding the first major bullet item there. Is there any science behind the contention that there's a safety issue?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Do we have would the city engineer care to?
Or sign man?
This basically applies mostly to political signs cluttering at the corners during the crazy season, right?
Right.
No, but he said that it was because of safety. He took it away.
It would not be limited just to political signs.
Right.
It would be limited to any non-commercial signs.
But my point is, though, is there scientific evidence that this is an issue?
Good evening. In answer to the question, we were really relating to the AASHTO design manual for site stopping distances in regard to approaching intersections. So at 25 miles an hour, the design distance for a car to stop is 155 feet. So our concern was more having drivers that are distracted as they approach an intersection, driveway, but mainly the intersection. If there's, we'd rather have them pay attention to other cars, intersection of the traffic. But if they're having to look at signs and they get distracted, well, then suddenly they're going to be within that stopping distance and they may not be able to stop in time for the pedestrians or the other vehicles.
So why wasn't this an issue with the art in the traffic circles?
Exactly, that's where I was going.
Well, that actually wasn't really brought up, at least to me. I didn't have any input on that, but having art is more like landscaping. But if we start dealing with something where someone has to spend time to
distraction,
read,
Andrew.
True, but there's also reading involved in signs. Someone wants to spend more time reading, and you hear that. We've had complaints with that with our message boards, where people will actually slow down to read the message boards to see what the signs are, than to actually, continue on with the traffic.
Okay.
Is that all, Tom? Okay, Romero's next.
Following on that, when we raised this issue with the Arts Commission, and I'm supportive of having the signs in there, we were told that it actually serves based upon studies that have been done as a calming mechanism, that when people are coming to that circle and they see art, that they slow down. So I would think that this would, as Councilmember Odell, also apply to the signs in the circle. Again, I bring out that I have not seen any other city moving in this direction, and this is not part of the lawsuit. It also goes counterintuitive to what we've already been doing. As you point out, we already have issues with not putting it in the medians or roundabouts that King County and Redmond allow. So those are allowed even in those messages. So I think we've already gone beyond what has been required or asked for here. So I'm not very satisfied with this direction that it's going. And frankly, if you want to have people slow down, you want to be able to do it at that intersection as a calming device similar to the art. So that's my 2 bits. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, should I go on the other issues, or should I wait till this round goes through?
Well, this is just questions on the staff presentation. We're not going to dig into the details until after the public hearing, right?
So we dig in later?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom.
Andrew, real quick.
Nice try.
On one of the earlier tables, if you can go back to that, with the height limits, 3 feet above grade for type 1, 3.5 feet for type 2 non-commercial temporary signs. Isn't that height restriction for safety to make sure that a driver can see above the sign, to see pedestrians?
That's correct.
And see all the other signs?
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Malchow.
Well, I'm going to follow up with that just on a quick question. Why are they different for type 1 and type 2 as far as the height limit? Is there any reason, or just the standard A-frame is 3.5 feet?
I'm going to have to defer.
We could respond to that. Yeah, just the type of construction for an A-frame typically yields a 3.5-foot height.
Okay. My actual question was, one of the questions I asked last night was going to be specific to that 150-foot radius and any alternatives to that language that you might have proposed. And I didn't see any here. I don't know if it was considered and just couldn't think of anything, or...
So we have further in tonight's discussion after the public hearing section some slides that relate to decision points, and one of those decision points is a discussion around the 150-foot radius and some other alternatives.
Great, thank you.
Romero?
Yeah, and I forgot to ask one question dealing with the banners and the different options. There was the one of limiting it to government, and if you limit it to government speech, as I have here, you said it would limit it to city only, if that's correct. Now, if you limit it to city only, government, then that would exclude school districts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it would only be there. All right, so all school districts, whether private or public, would then be precluded from doing that.
Correct.
Thank
Okay, no other questions about the presentation? Then maybe we will open the public hearing. Do we have a sign-up slip? For
Before that, I was hoping to invite up our Planning Commission Chair, Shanna Collins, to speak a little bit about the Planning Commission's recommendation and their deliberations.
Sure.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Planning Commissioners, City Council members. I'm Shanna Collins. I'm the Chair of the Planning Commission, and I'm here tonight to sort of assist staff in letting you guys know what we talked about when we talked about all these really important issues. They told me that the 150-foot radius had come up quite a bit and that people were really concerned about the 150-foot radius and how we came up with...
Shanna,
oh, you can
I ask you to speak up a little bit? I've got hearing aids and I'm still not hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What'd you say, Tom?
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the 150-foot radius. The Planning Commission felt very strongly that this was a safety issue. Especially two commissioners were not satisfied with just the eliminating signs from the sidewalk, the medians, and the roundabouts. They felt that we needed to do more. And so staff had come up with a 150-foot radius, eliminating the signs within that radius. We didn't discuss any alternatives. We did talk about it for quite a while. We talked about limiting it to 100 foot. We saw slides that showed us 100 foot, 150 foot, 200 foot. And the commission was unanimous that 150 feet was the right amount. So we actually didn't talk about this until the very last meeting. It was at our public hearing when we talked about this. But like I said, it was unanimous. We felt that they should be eliminated from the intersection. The other thing that we spent most of our time talking about was the wall signs, the 10% facade, or 10% of the facade, and we spent a lot of time talking about that, and ultimately staff recommended that we put a minimum and a maximum on the wall signs so that, you know, a business could have a minimum amount of sign and then there could be a maximum amount of sign. Mr. Pyle had brought up a really important point about if a movie theater, for instance, came to Sammamish and how big the side of one of those walls could be and how important it was to limit those wall signs to, I think it's the 320 feet. Yeah, I think 320 feet is the max and 10 square feet is the minimum. We also spent a lot of time talking about the residential monuments, and we ultimately decided, with guidance from staff, to go with one entry monument, or one two-sided entry monument per entrance, or two one-sided entry monuments. So if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that a little bit. But that's something we spent a lot of time talking about. And we also spent a lot of time talking about whether or not art should be part of the sign code. There was comment from the public that art should be eliminated from the sign code, and that's something that we debated and decided ultimately that we should put that aside and talk about that at a later date because there just wasn't enough time to go through this. And as you guys, I'm sure, can see, that this was a really complex issue, especially for the Planning Commission and having two new commissioners. The sign code update definitely exhausted our brains. We did talk about the electronic reader board. I feel that it's important that we allow the high schools that don't have one to obtain one if they would like one. I think that would be fair. But at this point, since the electronic reader board pilot program has been eliminated, we need more time to discuss that at a later date. So it was the art murals and the electronic reader boards that we felt we didn't really have enough time to discuss. And I should also mention, with the community banners, I think the Planning Commission was unanimous in deciding that community banners should be limited to government speech. And I think the reason for that is that the options aren't great, as you can see.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The options aren't great. You know, it's like either have them be just government speech or open it up to everybody, or don't do it at all. We felt that those were the three options before us, and so we felt that the best option was to limit it to government speech. So that's what I have. I'm very thankful to Mr. Pyle and Mr. Goodman. They did an excellent job shepherding us through this process, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Malchow.
Thank you. Shanna, thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for your work as well as the planning commissions on this topic. I do have a couple of questions. So included in our packet is a letter kind of outlining a little bit of what you just gave us tonight. And the bullet point on reducing temporary sign pollution is tied to a 150-foot radius. So it doesn't talk specifically there about safety. So my confusion or question for you is, are you commingling the terms pollution and safety together? Or I watched some of the Planning Commission meetings and there was a lot of talk about the word pollution. And so I'm just trying to extrapolate, how much of this is pollution related to numbers of signs and just kind of cluttering the look of an intersection versus the safety element.
Well, I think, to be completely honest, I don't know how that we could separate it, because a lot of people may feel that they don't want the sign pollution and then use the safety, of course, as the scapegoat. So I think that that's not the case in the two people that felt strongly about it. I think they really felt strongly about the safety issue, but I feel like you could use one or the other, and who's to say that one is right? I think looking at the science is probably something that should be looked into. I remember when someone told me, when you're turning in an intersection, do you want to be reading a sign? Is that safe? And to me, that made a lot of sense, that no, I don't want to be reading a sign when I'm turning through an intersection. And so when we started talking about that, I think that was one of the things that brought everybody along and put everybody on the safety side of it.
Okay, I think I'm tracking on where you were on that, but I do have another question, because part of the recommendation then would allow for a right-of-way permit to be issued for signs to then show up within that 150-foot radius. And I'm curious if you guys walked through the scenario where one organization or one political candidate gets a right-of-way permit, then they all get a right-of-way permit, and suddenly the 150-foot radius is no
Doesn't
longer.
mean anything.
So did you guys walk through what that scenario might look like?
No,
Okay.
we did not.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, Shannon, thanks. Did you have any public input, or was there a public comment about the 150-foot or about sign pollution?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I can't recall, at least. Most of the public input was about art in the public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. And then there were two other questions that I had come up last night with the type 2 days. Are we going to talk about that later, or is that something that was the Planning Commission involved with that?
They were involved in that, and yes, we do have a slide coming up regarding the decision points, which includes the 2-day number as one of your decision points.
So would you want to talk about that now, or should I hold?
I would hold off. I don't think it's, Planning Commission didn't have.
We'll see where that goes. Okay,
We didn't,
I'll hold my other question too then.
I don't think we felt that strongly about the temporary signs. I know that people were concerned about the farmer's market, and those are the signs you're talking about, right? The 2 days that they have to be out there 2 days ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think the main thing that we were concerned about is not having them out too long, and then also not having them too short. Just enough time to get people to know that this event is coming up, and then take them away so that you don't get sick of seeing them.
I'm curious, I
just remember that's what we talked about.
I mean, how did you end up at 2 days? I'm going to ask the question. I'm sorry.
I can see.
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Okay.
I recall the conversation centering around the amount of effort it takes for somebody to put up a sign and the value it brings to the event, and it not being as one of the main mechanisms by which they advertise the event, because those signs are typically located within a certain proximity to the event, and it's more of an indicator when someone is trying wayfinding of where it is, so that they remember that that's where it is and are able to find it when they arrive in the proximity of the event.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Councilmember Odell.
Thank you. Dave, I'm going to disagree with you on that last comment, because I see A-frame signs for stuff all over the city and they're nowhere near it. Shanna, I want to take a moment and thank you and the Planning Commission for all that you guys do. you put in an awful lot of time and effort, and I don't think it's recognized enough. So on my own behalf, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm sure that the rest of the council will agree with me. Did you guys come up with that sign?
Mr. Goodman is constantly giving us these.
Okay.
Lord.
With regard to the what do we call it, the residential signs, there are a number of different varieties all over town right now, and most of them are much bigger than what you've allotted in terms of square footage. And I'm wondering, I'm going to argue the opposite. I'd hate to have a 4-foot square sign on 228th with people slowing down to look at it because they can't read it. I'm wondering if council may want to take another look at that in a broader discussion. The time limits. You're recommending 180 consecutive days, and I understand the logic for that. It covers both, for political signs now, it covers both a primary and a general election. In many cases, a lot of the signs disappear between the primary and the general and have to be put back up again. So I'm wondering if, even though it may seem like more work, a removal right after the primary with a hiatus before the general might get rid of some of the complaints about pollution. Do you guys have that conversation at all?
I have to be honest, the meeting that we talked about duration, I have a new 3-month-old son, actually, so I missed those first 2 meetings. So this issue has been been a little bit difficult for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Is the question whether we took into account the fact that some election signs are removed at a certain period in between the primary and the general?
Could be removed just to reduce the visual pollution issue. Not necessarily to save the sign, but to...
And whether we can require that or not, is that the question?
You mean like shortening the time to 60 or...
like, say, 45, 60 days before the election date.
Then they'd have to remove them all after the primary and put them back up.
Right. It'd be a pain.
One of the conversations that we had as staff, however, is you need to make a decision that is consistent for campaign signs, as consistent for sports signs, advertising, spring sports, for example, baseball tryouts. So if you have 180 days before those signs have to come down, you're going to have spring sports still being out there in September. So it's something to just be aware of and consider, that it is going to be an issue.
Well, as this is written now, Lyman, that would be allowed.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm just bringing that up, that it, again, just a reminder that those signs are not just political signs, but they run the gamut for non-commercial signs.
Yeah, for tutoring schools and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Questions?
That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, thank you. First, following on Councilmember Odell's comment, I have a big concern about trying to treat Sammamish differently, because when we have campaigns, there's no way Maria Cantwell or Patty Murray or Reichert or anybody else will know that Sammamish is different at the primary and have to take down the signs. I mean, we have enough problems just trying to figure out which city has medians that have to be adhered to here versus others. So it would be almost impossible to get all of these other candidates to realize that our little city is different from everybody else's for practicality.
Actually, we do communicate with every candidate.
No, I know, but even then, that's what I'm saying.
Well-
For our medians, it's already a big issue for people to go through. So that's already a difficulty recognizing it there. But when you're going to the statewide and over those outside of the 45th, it becomes much more difficult to be able to do that and to track. So the practicality of it. Shanna, thank you very much for all that you and the Planning Commission have done, in particular, the work that you've put in, especially since you've already opened the Pandora box and mentioned your newborns. I want to thank you for that sacrifice that you've done there. Following on a question that was raised by Council Member Hornish as far as the 150, that was discussed without public input, I assume that the 50-foot pushbacks or setbacks for the large signs was also discussed by the Planning Commission, and that there was no public input into that as to the distances. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Second, when you said that there are two persons strongly opinionated of the Planning Commission, well, I assume it had to be the Planning Commission unless staff was involved in being opinionated. Am I correct in assuming that one of those...
Shaking their head no.
Yeah, we're out of there. Am I assuming correctly that one of them is now gone from the Planning Commission?
Yes.
So we're down to one. Okay. All right. I just wanted to double check that. Thank you very much.
There's one thing I wanted to add to that, actually, and that it started actually much deeper. The commissioner who was really concerned about this was thinking about how we could change the arterials so that no signs would be allowed in the arterial, and to change them into, you see where I'm going with this. But anyway, I think staff came up with the compromise. That's the compromise that was that we landed on, because it started off in a much more conservative direction. So.
Thank you.
Tom, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I did. It's, again, getting to the distance issue, although in a different vein. We had one campaign where we had a candidate who literally put a sign every 50 to 100 feet on Sahali Way and 228th. Did you guys get into any discussion on how you avoid the Burma Shave sign effect? For those who may not know what that is, Burma Shave is a company in the Midwest whose advertising campaign basically had about 12 signs, all one right after the other, that you couldn't miss. And there have been people here who've done that same thing on a political campaign. I wondered if that came up.
Actually, I do think we talked about that a little bit and talked about how we would not be able to prevent it given the legal framework. So I think it was that now that all the signs, political signs, local sports signs, nonprofit signs, now that all of those signs were included, you couldn't limit how closely they put them together.
No, I'm talking about one candidate.
That's very unfortunate. We actually did not talk as much about elections, and I would say we didn't talk about election signs as much as we talked about residential signs and art and murals and the wall signs in the commercial town center.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor Keller.
Shanna, thank you as well for being here tonight. Just a quick question going to the same issue about the 150 feet. And Councilmember Malchow had asked about alternatives. I'm wondering if there was any limitation to the 150 feet on maybe main intersections in the city, limiting which intersections that would apply to and maybe not to other ones. Was there any discussion around that?
No, there wasn't.
None. Okay. And then one other comment that, again, last night we talked about the time frame, the 2 days. I just wanted to pile on that one, that maybe we need to have a little discussion about the length of time, those 2 days.
Good.
That is on one of the upcoming slides following the public hearing tonight.
Shanna, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just for the audience, your meetings are also shown on Channel 21, and if you have insomnia, this is another.
Join us.
Yes.
Another venue.
No, they're very interesting, Shanna.
That's right. I just have sleep deprivation.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you all.
So I think, are we ready for the public hearing now? Okay, do I have a sign-up sheet for the public hearing? Okay, public hearing is open, and we have Jay Regenstripe first. And then it looks like Jen or Jim, I can't tell. Welcome,
Hi,
Jay.
Ready? I'm Jay Regenstripe. I work with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, and I'm here to make a request on behalf of the district for a change to the sign code as it's proposed. And we did provide a letter. It's on page 265 of your packet, and it includes suggested language that we'd like to have included. And this is about the murals on our tanks. We don't consider the murals on our water tanks to be signs, and we want to ensure that the sign code would not be applied to those murals. And so the request is to specifically exempt murals such as those on the water tanks from the code. And the way we're trying to frame this in the language that we provided is to limit the exemption to murals that are for public agencies. So it's not just any mural, but murals with public agencies. It's very likely that we're going to be recoding at least one or two of our tanks in the next few years. The 2 million gallon tank that's in front of our office on 228, the mural on that is over 24 years old, and it is starting to show its age if you look closely. And so we want to avoid unnecessary permitting and delays that might be associated with trying to go through a process. And it's a regular maintenance item, that activity that we have to do with all of our tanks. And to my knowledge, we have never gotten a permit to paint our tanks, either solid or with a mural. And as I said, it's a required maintenance activity. So I really am requesting that you please consider including the language that we proposed in the sign ordinance as you go through your next couple meetings. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Jay. Jan Bird. I finally deciphered your name there.
Yeah, sorry. The email's a dead giveaway. Good evening. Jan Bird. I'm at 3310 221st Avenue Southeast. And I just want to comment on the temporary signs. I think I'm liking the changes here, and maybe Lyman Howard can kind of help me understand because we had a little run-in last week with some of my signs from the Native Plant Society. It was our twice-a-year native plant sale that helps. It's our only fundraiser to keep the organization running. And we had signs with the, I guess it's called plastic foam core, I guess on an H-frame. And if I'm reading the proposed one right, it sounds like that would be okay to use now. Is that?
Under the proposed?
Under the proposed?
Yes,
Yeah.
it would be legal.
Okay. Thank you. That would be an improvement because I was told I'd have to do those sandwich boards, and that'd be quite an expense to do those.
Under the current code, the A-frame board would have been legal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you. I think that's an improvement for those of us that are nonprofits, and are kind of an inexpensive way for us to get the word out. And the sale ended at 4 o'clock, and any signs I had remaining, I took out at 5 o'clock that day. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? Nope, then public hearing is closed. Okay. Yeah.
So the last little bit of the presentation here is meant to help us focus on the points that you'd like to deliberate on in our meeting on May 9th and also on May 16th. It's a bit of an aggressive schedule, but I understand that your calendar for June is very packed with lots of complex issues. So we're hoping that by going through the specific items that we feel it will be of most interest to you, that we can really focus on those and use our time on the 9th and the 16th really efficiently. So now would be the time, if there's some issue that you feel you really want to focus on next week or the week after, to identify that, and we can help prepare materials that'll speak to that.
I think historically what we've done is allowed a couple days for council to write up their list of items. I have a bunch myself, but I don't want to extend this to midnight tonight. So maybe if we can do some, what do you think of that process?
That's fine. I've got a lot too.
Yeah. So maybe go over some of the things that you've already.
They've already recorded.
Yeah. Would that work if we provided to you in, what, a certain day?
Sure. Absolutely.
Like which?
How soon would you like them, by Thursday?
Given that we have a turnaround for next week's meeting, or I guess that we would want to have those by end of day Thursday.
Okay.
Who do you want us to email? You?
You could email those to David Goodman and myself.
Okay.
Okay.
But you already have the ones that we gave you prior and today, so we don't have to repeat those. It's just additional ones that we're giving
Right.
to you.
And so I believe you were just going to go through the decision points at this point, the items that they have heard, that they will ask the questions on next week. But then if you could let people know additional items that you would like to have as
In
decisions
addition to
for
what
the
we've already
council,
asked.
email those to us.
And one of the points of this discussion is to attempt to try to retain the structure that we've assembled here, because we've worked with our legal counsel and they have helped us put it in a structure that we feel is something that will meet the requirements of, or the intent of Reed versus Gilbert. But there are some adjustments that can be made to the numbers you see here. So for example, under type 2 signs placed in the public right-of-way 2 consecutive days, that's open to debate. The number 2 is the number that was landed on through some internal discussion with staff and also some discussion with the Planning Commission, and that could be adjusted. So that's the point here, is that if you feel that maybe it should be 7 and you have a rationale for that would be a good point of discussion for you to have on that.
So we should itemize points of discussion that we'd like to have the council discuss, and perhaps typographic errors and questions about what it means.
Yes.
Like, for example, you have billboards are outlawed, but we don't have a definition for a billboard. So things like that.
Yes, that'd be very helpful.
Okay, good. Do you have anything further to present now?
Well, so I'll go through what is, to our understanding, the most important issues to you. So, if you hear what you're hoping to hear, then that's great. And if there's other things that we're not covering, then we're happy to take those into consideration and present those to you again as well.
Good.
So the first here is to do with the non-commercial temporary signs. It sounds like there's specific, we can talk about this chart as a whole, but it sounds like there's specific interest in talking about the size limit for type 3 signs, with the difference depending on whether a sign is within or more than 50 feet from property line. And it also sounds like there's interest in discussing the time limits both for the type 1 and type 2 signs. Secondly, there's clearly a lot of interest in the 150-foot radius recommendation from the Planning Commission. So beginning with the question of, should there be a sign-free radius around intersections to begin with? If yes, then how large should it be, and what are some other ways you could tinker with that to make it a little easier to follow and to enforce? Or if there is not an interest in such a sign-free radius, then is the council interested in other methods of deterring sign pollution and also improving safety around intersections? And then our final one is the community banner program, where again the commission recommended city-sponsored events only, city-hosted events only as well, But as we've mentioned a couple times, you have the 4 options in front of you of discontinuing the program, continuing it as is, using it for government speech, or opening it to all non-commercial messages. And then the sub-point to that is whether the council wishes to keep the option open to expanding the program outside of where it currently is, and whether we should leave that in 21A.
And I will add a 4th item that we've heard and we've talked a little bit about tonight already, which is the gateway signs. And the question there is whether there is support on the council for addition or modification to the sign code as proposed to add anything regarding gateway signs, depending on the scale and scope of ultimately what those changes would be, and whether that's a standalone code amendment or whether it's something that can be easily integrated into the draft version you're looking at now, or whether you don't have support for that and are not interested in adding anything at this time.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, we're running way over time. I want to try to limit the scope on this. I would suggest maybe we take the gateway signs up with the follow-on that we're going to talk about with the reader boards, which we don't have to talk about next week, to limit time and scope. Same thing with murals. That's going to be a follow-on too. So we could put all those in and then limit our scope to the issues that you've raised here plus whatever else we raise, so that we're way over our time limit on this matter. So I'm trying to winnow it down and get something done. So.
That's a good comment, Mr. City Manager. We did have a comment about mural. We had a comment about electronic reader boards. And there's an urgency and schedule on the electronic reader boards, and the murals, well, I'm not sure how urgent, but they're fading rapidly.
We could work on those sooner rather than later.
Okay.
But not in the next 2 weeks.
Right.
No.
Okay.
This year, right?
4 weeks.
Yeah.
Before football season?
I think that's a good summary.
Does that include the
gateway?
The gateway, there's 3 items that would be added to consideration.
That sounds appropriate.
Okay, everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, then I think we're finally done with this topic for tonight.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to receiving your comments.
Right. By end of day Thursday, right? Okay, now we have unfinished business. We have item number 3 from the consent calendar, the contract on the Louis Thompson Hill landslide area design with consultant David Evans Associate. Let's see. Okay.
And we have our Public Works Director, Steve Liniszewski, who will give us a bit of an introduction and answer any questions you might have.
Good evening again, citizens. The room's a little less crowded now. Mayor and council and staff, Steve Liniszewski, Public Works. So before you was a contract for engineering services for the repair design of the Louis Thompson Hill slide area. Outstanding the details of the event. Briefly, water went over the road, plugged culvert, caused the slide. We are designing the road so we can fix that damaged area as well as reroute the storm drain outfall in the creekway below. And it's not much more than that. Your specific question,
I had a technical question, and
Sure.
that was really all, is that the current, so we fixed there's like a berm that we've put up.
The
right
berm is
where-
to divert water from continuing to go
Right,
over the
no,
edge.
and I
right?
totally understand that, but here's where my technical question comes in, is that berm stops. So assuming water were running there, where it stops is another very sharp drop-off, and that's right where the car from Eastside Catholic went plunging down. So if water were running there, are we going to fix that somehow so the water, if it were running along that berm, doesn't run there and cause another landslide further down?
So the intent would be to collect the storm water and then divert it down the slope.
So that berm will be a
Hopefully
non-issue?
carry it and convey it, right?
Okay.
So it's not overland flowing. There still will be rainfall and overland flow coming from, yes, but try not to concentrate any flows on the slope.
Excellent, okay, that was it.
Okay, then do we have a motion to authorize the city manager to award and execute a design contract?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote of 6-0, it is approved. Thank you, Steve.
You bet. Sorry for banging the podium.
Yeah. Now, the next one was item number 7. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you very much. We are fortunate to have our Fire Chief, Jeff Clark, here to basically give you a very brief overview of how we ended up in this position and compliments to the council with the questions that were raised the last study session when we talked about this. So without further ado, I'll let the chief talk about progress that was made after that study session.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. I appreciate being invited back. Back in March, the EFR board did suggest and approve that we move forward with extending the ILA another 5 years and then changing the automatic renewal feature from 7 years to 10. When I came to this body before to give you an update, there were several questions raised that I then took back to the EFR board, and the EFR board subsequently approved moving forward with that. Two of those questions, question number one had to do with the right to withdraw. In the current contract, the right to withdraw language says that you can give as little as 11 months notice. It's really 1 year's notice. Members of this group brought up the need to, the possibility of extending that even further. That prompted more discussion, and the EFR board did go along with my recommendation of 3 years as a recommendation to move forward for all of you to consider. The second item had to do with the smoothing effect of the formula. Rather than the current agreement smooths that every 4 years, my recommendation is to move that to every 2 years, starting in 2022, once the current funding model has been fully implemented, which by that time it will be. Again, the EFR board approved that, and they also approved moving forward, which I believe was another suggestion from this body, that we take action in this in 3 separate amendments so that if there's any change, we can keep the move going. So overall, I'd like to thank you all for your leadership on this subject. You definitely helped the process move forward in a more smooth fashion. Fire District 38 and Fire District 10 have already approved the 3 amendments as recommended in your packet. And North Bend is considering it right now as well. And Issaquah will be the last to consider it. They'll be considering it on May 15th, is my understanding. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, Councilmember Odell.
Not really questions so much as I felt that given the importance of this particular issue to the city, it's the single largest line item in our budget, that it was worth talking about a little bit in open council so that the public could be perhaps more aware of some of the changes than might have otherwise been the case. And Jeff, I'm sorry to drag you out here to do this tonight, but I appreciate your coming in, and I certainly appreciate all that you've done to move this whole issue forward and the changes that have happened to the different parts of the ILA. I think it's a net benefit for everybody, really. I did have a couple of constituents contact me with concerns about the extension and what that might mean for the city in terms of our future flexibility. But I've gotten past that issue myself personally. And I think that if we can do a better job of long-range planning, everyone will benefit. I'm personally convinced that at least some of the fire stations are not where they should be, and they could be, it's a healthy exercise to every 10 years or so go through where your resources are and say, are they in the right place and is there enough of them? And I think that's the whole objective of your strategic plan and what you want to do here, and I fully support that. The 3-year plan withdrawal thing, I think is needed because in the event that a partner at some point in the future should decide to go a separate way for reasons that are understandable and agreed to by everybody, there will be a need for time to do what needs to be done so that both the departing party and the remaining parties have a job to do and time to do it and can do it well. Having been at the helm of the city when we went through this ourselves, 4 years or so ago, it was a scramble, frankly, to try to get things done in 11 months. And we thought we could do it, but you never know. At the same time, I think that looking forward, there is strength in numbers, and the people of Sammamish and the people of Redmond, the people of Issaquah, the people of North Bend, and Districts 10 and 38 are all better served by us working together as a team. And for that reason, I'm going to move the motion.
Second.
Okay, well, we actually have 3 resolutions, and
So I was going to say, I would move that all 3 be passed at the same time for the expediency of time.
I would agree with that.
Second, all 3?
do we have a problem? That's okay? Okay, did you have another comment, Councilmember Valderrama?
Oh, actually, I do have an extra comment. First of all, I wanted to thank the chief for all of his work. As far as the long-range planning mentioned by Councilmember Odell, giving now this extension, that will allow them to start looking with a longer time horizon at the stations. And I think the 3-year notice is not only to see and to prepare, but it's a cooling off period. I think one of the problems we had in the last exercise is that things were coming so quickly at different people that the parties weren't sometimes able to sit back objectively. This will give us more time if someone should have that discussion to be able to work through those issues, and I'm appreciative of your suggestion for this.
That's a
Thank
fair
you.
statement,
Good. Deputy Mayor Keller.
Thank you. Chief, thank you for coming tonight. I actually, while I compliment you many times when you're here, I actually want to talk about our council for a minute. Being the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board member, along with Councilmember Valderrama representing Sammamish, when we brought this discussion to our council and we got input from every one of the council members here in the discussion, I really think that this information that we brought back to the board as board representatives was really well received, and it really was helpful for us to work together as a board, and it's very enlightening and actually nice to hear that the districts and at least North Bend tonight hopefully would be voting as well positively on this. So this actually really exemplifies, I think, somewhat the relationship that we have with Eastside Fire and Rescue and the board members. So thank you to this council for the input that you gave us.
Well put. Madam Clerk, do we have resolution numbers?
No, we don't, because it was on.
So we're just going to pass resolutions, and we don't, you'll assign numbers later. Is that okay? Okay, was there a motion on the table for all 3?
I move adoption of all 3 resolutions.
I'll second.
Then I'll second my motion.
Yeah. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
By your vote of 6-0, all 3 resolutions, unnamed resolutions, are approved. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Numbered right. Okay. Okay, quick break. That means 5 minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
We have no city manager.
No city manager.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have Andrew Zegers introduce this matter for us this evening, our city engineer.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and fellow council members. We are here to, actually want to switch to the presentation. We're here to introduce the ordinance for a franchise agreement with the Zayo Group, who's a telecommunications provider. I do have here Joe Morton, who's a project manager for this area. I'm going to do a quick couple slide introduction, and then I'll switch it over to him. Joe brought in a couple slides kind of explaining what the Zayo Group is and why they're coming to Sammamish. And then we will then follow up with the rest of the presentation that will kind of explain the franchise agreement. For many of you, we went through this a couple years ago with the Astound Wave Group. It's the very same exact process, and the agreement is pretty much the same for what we went through before and with this one with the Zayo. And kind of the background, Zayo Group LLC, they applied for a franchise agreement to install facilities within the city right-of-way in the city of Sammamish. Zayo's looking to install backhaul fiber network in the Pacific Northwest, which is now including in the city of Sammamish. The purpose is enhanced telecommunication services to local, regional, and national customers, and it'll install a combination of both underground and aerial networks within the city. And with that, I will switch it over to Joe, and just bear with me as I load up the next presentation.
Welcome,
Thank
Joe.
you, Andrew.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, staff, and council members. My name is Joe Morton. I live at 2204 33rd Avenue Southeast in Puyallup, and I am a project manager at Zayo Group. And Zayo Group is it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Zayo Group Holdings Incorporated. It's a publicly traded company listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker Zayo. Zayo is a global telecommunications company and is certified as a public utility by the Washington Transportation and Utilities Commission to provide telephone and telecommunications. Zayo has a large, expansive telecom network footprint throughout the state of Washington, as well as throughout North America and Europe. Zayo is a wholesale provider of telecommunication services whose facilities and services are utilized by other retail telecoms, such as AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, Windstream, CenturyLink, among others. Both their terrestrial wireline as well as their wireless services. And an example of how we support these companies' wireless cellular systems is the provision of backhaul communications from their customers' cell towers to a mobile telephone switching office over fiber optics. Zayo facilities and services are also used by large enterprises, government agencies, and educational institutions. Currently, on an international scale, Zayo's all-fiber network exceeds 126,000 nautical miles, or 9.9 million fiber miles, connecting thousands of data centers, enterprise locations, telephone carrier exchange points, and wireless towers, among other government agencies, hospitals, universities. Let's see. Can you switch to the next slide? And how Zayo feels they can benefit the city of Sammamish is our further expansion within Sammamish, which is part of a currently progressing vast Puget Sound area network expansion. Will enable Sammamish's citizens, government agencies, businesses, and other institutions to directly connect to our global network, as well as the networks of other telecoms, cable and satellite operators, and other network operators throughout the world. Moreover, regardless of one's telephone service carrier, the wholesale facilities we are developing will directly benefit all carriers, and thus their end-user customers, by augmenting and expanding their capabilities as demand growth continues at an ever-accelerating rate.
What are the different shades of blue in there? What do they represent?
Go back to that. So the blue is current existing municipal telecom franchise agreements that are in place in the Puget Sound area. The unshaded areas indicate franchise agreements are currently in progress or not required. And this image excludes county-level franchises that Zayo also holds, such as King County, Pierce County, Snohomish County.
Are you working with Mercer Island too, then?
We are in negotiations with Mercer Island for a franchise.
Is the different shading just to indicate different jurisdictions, or
just
is there a technical difference?
Technical, no, just to show where we have franchise agreements.
Okay, thank you.
And what we're proposing currently in Sammamish, Zayo's initial construction work proposal, we're planning consists of two immediate objectives. The first is to provide communication services requested by one of its wholesale customers to help accommodate the demand for retail customers who are citizens and businesses in and around Sammamish. The second is that this build will initially benefits our wholesale customer and its retail customers, further enables Zayo to provide access to our networks to other end users in Sammamish that currently do not have access to our networks or any high-speed networks, and to enable that access at a lower cost than if we were only speculatively building. The diagram at the bottom of the screen is that our current proposed build path, the aqua lines, or blue, would be aerial construction, and the red lines are underground construction.
You show Southeast 20th as aerial, but there should be a pipe under there, Andrew, when we redid 20th?
Yeah, that we do. Every time we do improvements in the arterials, we do install conduits for future fiber optic, either city or other facilities that may request it.
So shouldn't that be available?
We should have a conduit out there.
So okay. Fourth.
And Fourth will have it, correct. And 228th does.
And Zayo is not opposed to utilizing those avenues.
Yeah, I would imagine.
We prefer you do.
Exactly. And we do work with many cities within the state to utilize the infrastructure in return for services.
Okay.
Next slide, please. And this is kind of just showing you the telecom value chain, where we fit in between the enablers of infrastructure, public rights of way, private landowners. We're the infrastructure in the middle that provides to the communication service providers. We're more of a link to the end user infrastructure, whether it be dark fiber, lit services. We provide the pathway. And our differentiators are, we have deep metro assets throughout the country, intercity routes connecting metro areas across the country, strong financial foundation, access to capital, and willingness to invest in customer solutions, construction and management expertise with large projects, and the ability to offer solutions diverse from other carriers.
So how are they providing their backhaul now, these?
Various other providers at usually higher costs and lower bandwidth.
So our end users could expect higher bandwidth or faster service?
That is a safe assumption, yes, sir. Additional benefits to Sammamish, next slide, please, is greater voice coverage, including essential 911 emergency, first responders, and other essential public service communication capabilities or capacities, advanced bandwidth infrastructure, and cellular service for community businesses, hospitals, educational institutions. Increased competition in the telecom space is good for businesses and consumers. Increased service availability and lower prices, and help to attract economic development to the city, with companies needing access to state-of-the-art communications. And this last slide is kind of a sampling of our current carrier customers and some of our enterprise and content customers that currently use our service. And the very last page of the presentation are websites that you could go to for additional information on our company. And we do have a 24/7 network operation control center that monitors all our traffic on our networks. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I got a question.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Can we go back to that slide of Sammamish that you had there? Yes. Oh, no, that one.
Yes, sir.
Are you in any way engaged with the city as far as the town center plan?
No, sir.
None? So we're not accommodating or taking this into account and looking at this?
That's why I mentioned fourth.
So you're only working on the south half of Sammamish, it looks like.
Currently, the customer that we have in the Sammamish is covered under this proposal. We're not opposed to talking about other projects at all.
Yeah. Well, this would be an advantage to take it, or an opportunity to take advantage of this.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they're right next to it.
Yeah. But parts, to make sure we get it throughout the town center.
Right. Well, even with town center, it's there.
Well, just above there. Yes.
If the conduit or the backbone that they're putting in is at Southeast Fourth, that could actually be taken care of.
Well, that's Southeast 20th there.
Oh, is that Southeast 20th?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right.
What is the yellow?
The yellow is third party. It's usually our customer conduit.
Oh.
But it's going all the way up to Skyline High School and City Hall.
Almost.
We don't want that.
And this is just a zoomed-in version of Sammamish. It ties in currently in the north in Redmond and down south in Issaquah to our network that spurs out across the city and nation.
Okay.
I'm a little confused. How does it get to Redmond
Yeah.
if it stops here?
This is only the south half of our city.
Correct. So down south, it taps in around I-90, and it goes around the lake.
But it doesn't go
the other
through
way.
the northern
Not on East Lake, West Lake, Sammamish side through
West Lake,
Bellevue,
okay.
up around.
It's going at the speed of light, so it's pretty good.
Very fast.
literally. Tom, do you have another question?
Well, I was just going to ask, are you a U.S. company or German company? Because I get both. I want to pull you up.
We are U.S. Our headquarters out of Colorado.
Okay.
USA.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
I actually have some questions.
Okay. Councilmember Hornish.
Andrew, can you tell me the current franchises that we have for fiber and/or backhaul, I guess, specifically?
I'll have to look into what other franchise. I do know 2 years ago we did the Wave Astound group for
Whatever
very
happened
similar.
to that?
Well, we do have a franchise agreement with them. We do have some fiber optics coming in. It's usually by their providers that come in through right-of-way permits. More of a hit and miss. A lot of our permits we get right now are still with the current utilities, PSC, cable, Comcast, and that's what we're seeing a lot of.
A lot of the cable is aerial?
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to better understand, would any of this franchise be, some of it would be digging up to lay fiber, or is it taking over fiber that's dark, or is it pulling fiber through pipes? I guess I was a little bit understanding.
All three. Right now, we're proposing construction, actually placing conduit and or aerial lines.
How much of it would be construction? I guess that's the one concern I have.
Right
And what does it entail for the construction? Is it a trenching?
We use directional boring, trenching, whatever's allowed by the city. We follow the mandated moratoriums and any kind of restrictions there are.
So it's very
intrusive.
Yeah, not disruptive, I guess, is the point, is what I'm looking at.
It's not disruptive as far as it's within the whatever's permitted for traffic control, road detours, construction lane closures. We adhere to whatever's approved for permits. Our number one priority is public safety.
In the aerial, you would use existing poles and negotiate a deal with the owners of the poles, is that it?
Yes.
Like
And out here,
ca-
it's Puget Sound Energy, and they've permitted us many times.
So like you find cable going, aerial cable around the city?
Yes, exactly. The same stainless steel strand and fiber optic cable.
So I got one more question. I was curious about the one number you had in there. I think it was 126,000 nautical miles and 9.9 million fiber miles. What's the difference?
We actually have some underseas cable connecting the continents. That's, as far as the nautical miles, that's what I can explain.
Okay, because I was kind of curious. I thought maybe it was just a bunch of fiber that you add 10 fibers, for each
actually
mile or
different.
whatever. So
That's how you get the fiber miles.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, so it's a one conduit with 10 or 20 fibers. Okay.
That's what I was thinking, too.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Tom, you have another question?
Yeah, I do. The backbone of your system here is going to be 228th, which is our main arterial. And I'm going to be real curious about how much digging we're going to be doing versus stringing, just like Councilmember Hornish. The second thing I am curious about, and this is directed at staff, is it says there's no financial impact on the city. To me, that means we're not bearing any expense, but if there's going to be construction activity in the city, there will be some expense. And I'm also not seeing any offsetting revenue. So, Mr. City Manager, are we getting a franchise fee out of this, or what?
That actually will be covered in the next part of the presentation, so yes, we are.
I thought you were done.
No, I've got the next part. The next part is just discussing about the franchise agreement itself.
I'll hold fire on that one then.
Okay.
But I am concerned about the disruption to the city, just as some other people are.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Keller.
Where this might be covered later as well, I just wanted to ask a question. The comment came up about the dark pipe that we have around the city right now with the intention of it being available. but the mayor and I, a couple of years ago, were walking down 228 as there was some cable being pulled through the pipe on 228. And as we discussed, we stopped to discuss with the company that was pulling it and looking at it, the space is starting to become limited along 228. There are probably areas where in the city where it hasn't been touched. But I'm just wondering if we're looking at what is available on 228 for the future, if we're starting to fill up that capacity.
That's something we do have to look at. Recently, we did use, there should be two conduits that we install with all our projects, and I think one of them we're using right now with our ITS system.
right.
But I do believe we still have an empty one right next to it.
It doesn't take a lot of room for fiber.
No, it doesn't.
You know? I take it the ITS probably has a bundle of fibers, and maybe some of them are available.
It's a larger cable than what the fibers are. I think there's like a 1-inch cable that's going through there for the ITS, but it's a 3-inch conduit that we install, and we do, like say, we do typical is 2 conduits that is every time we do installations.
And we still can't turn left on yellow.
Sorry.
Okay, there's no more questions, so we should continue with the presentation, Andrew.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thank
So, like I said, I'm going to now kind of go over a little bit what the franchise agreement and the details in it. Again, this is the exact same that was negotiated a couple years ago with Astound and Wave, so all the rules still apply. For this franchise agreement, we do follow the Washington State Law, RCW 3599030. That does limit on what the city can deny a franchise agreement for, specifically items 3 and 4 in that section. We do abide by federal law, which prohibits cities from regulating the services that are being provided, but it does allow the city to ensure compliance with permitting. In this case, anytime there's a facility being installed in the right-of-way, they will be required to apply for a right-of-way permit for review and also be inspected by our inspectors. Also allows the city to charge fees to cover our permitting costs. Some of the highlights of the agreement, the agreement does give the authority to Zayo to construct, maintain, operate, and repair the fiber optic broadband systems that they're going to place within the right-of-way. It is a non-exclusive authority to Zayo. It does not include the right to install cable television, cellular services, anything else other than just the fiber optic. And if they were, that would have to then be negotiated under a separate agreement. It does not exempt Zayo from having to obtain other licenses, such as right-of-way permits or any other permits in regard to land development regulations that we have within the city. The conditions of acceptance. Upon approval from the City Council and the adoption of the ordinance, we have 30 days to sign all the paperwork. Zayo would have to pay the administrative fees that are associated in the agreement. Also submit the proof of the financial security. There is a performance bond that is also required as part of the agreement. And then also the insurance certificates for liability insurance that we require for work within the right-of-way. The transferability, it could be, Zayo could transfer to another provider as long as whoever they transfer to does agree in writing the responsibilities of all the conditions and obligations under this agreement with the city of Sammamish. The term of the agreement is for 10 years with an option to extend for another 5 years. And then the powers that we retain as a city is we are the full authority of the public right-of-way. That doesn't change. And we do have the power to enforce the laws. Liability protections, disclaim liability to Zayo for any damages related to the design, conditions, or safety of the public right-of-way. There's a broad indemnification clauses for the city and its officials and employees, especially when inspecting and any of the work that's within the right-of-way. It does require Zayo to obtain a $50,000 performance bond. Oop, that's a bond. Bad typo there. And full. It was quick. And full and faithful performance requires the Zayo to also maintain general liability insurance for work within the right-of-way. Reimbursement costs to the city. Let's see, the ZAO is required to reimburse the city for all costs to improve and inspect the ZAO's work. So every time they go out for a right-of-way permit, we do have the fees and also inspection fees that we get reimbursed, as we do with all our franchisee agreements. There is an agreement for ZAO to reimburse the city up to $3,000 per year to administer the agreement. And both in addition to the $5,000 franchise fee application fee that would be collected with this agreement. And then ZAO does have the duty of restoration, so anytime they do work in the right-of-way, they are required to leave any disturbed right-of-way in the same or better condition before they started to do the work. Now, in order to work in the construction standards within the right-of-way, work cannot commence without the city prior approval of the design documents and work plan, including mitigation, traffic flow, any of the traffic controls, any of the provisions where they're actually laying their fiber. If it conflicts with any of our city facilities, we do review that with a right-of-way permit. And obviously, if there's any other regulatory permits with planning, SEPA, or if there's any environmental, they still would be required to obtain those. The city does have the right to inspect the facilities to ensure compliance with the franchise agreement within 72 hours notice or in case of any emergency. The city retains the right to stop work immediately if the work is being done out of compliance or if it's being performed in an unsafe manner. Part of the facility relocations, the city can require ZAO to move its facilities under certain conditions, including for health and safety reasons. There's also provisions where we coordinate with our capital projects as well, as it's spelled out in an agreement. ZAO, we are required to submit maps of its facilities within the public right-of-way to the city, so we can have the records for our use as design, and any time someone would want to know where those things are. And then revocation of a franchise in the event of uncured default, the city does have the right to revoke the franchise. And with that, I can now open up for any questions.
Any further questions? Councilmember Hornish.
At the beginning there, Andrew, you talked about the state 2 paragraphs that would allow a disallowance. Can you highlight what those? Or maybe we can discuss it on the next time. I can look it up.
I will have to actually get back to you on that.
Okay, fair
I don't
enough.
have that with me.
I was just curious more than anything else. Thanks.
So Andrew, what happens at the end of, it's only a 10-year plus 5 agreement. What happens at the end of the agreement to the equipment?
Typically, what happens is we go into renewing a franchise agreement if it's still there. Recently, we just did that with PSE. Where we had an expired franchise agreement. I think it's in everyone's best interest to keep the franchise agreements going. Obviously, at the end of the term, that's when the city has the right to actually require removal of facilities within the right-of-way. But typically, in normal practice, as we just renegotiate a contract or a franchise agreement to extend a term and revisit the conditions.
So if we understand this, then let's say Verizon has cell towers, and I'm a Verizon customer. My cell call goes to the cell tower, and the cell tower is connected to your main fiber network as
Yes.
the backhaul. Is that it?
Correct. And we basically connect from their tower to their main switching.
Mhm.
We're just the
And so
fiber backbone for
You're
them.
providing more capacity for the backhaul than exists today.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Is that pretty clear to everybody? Any, Councilmember Odell.
Yeah, back on the finances. Could you go back to that slide, please? So what I'm seeing is $5,000 one-time franchise fee, correct?
That's correct.
$3,000 a year for administration.
Correct, for the life of a recurring fee for every year
Every
for the
year,
life
yeah.
of the agreement.
Up to, yes. And that's it.
Correct. And then reimbursement for any costs that are incurred during the right-of-way reviews and inspection in our time. So every time they would come in for right-of-way permits, those are additional fees that get reimbursed.
Okay. Wow. Pretty cheap.
So it's kind of like utilities. We're not charging any utility tax or franchise fee for the, cell towers pay quite a bit for tower existence, whereas the backhaul doesn't pay anything, I guess.
Very little.
And this is typical in the network. Agreements with other cities are very similar.
Yes, sir.
This bothers me because coming from my old industry, every time we flew an airplane to another country, we had to pay airway fees and handling charges. And this is essentially a free ride here. It's reflected, I suppose, hopefully, in the fees the consumers pay for their internet and telephone capability. But I think this is an area that's ripe for further discussion in the council, particularly in view of our financial roundtable and our upcoming financial retreat. I think we're missing a boat here.
Well, at the national level, it's only going to get worse.
Time to act now.
Yeah.
Well, if council would like, at the second reading, we will come back and we will discuss what other cities are charging. And make sure that what we're charging is consistent, and also give you the options that you may or may not have.
Good.
Yeah, I'd like to better understand the federal requirements and everything, so.
I'd like to get at Councilmember Hornish's concerns too.
Right. If you could send me those, I'd be happy to follow up specifically.
Okay, good. Well, this is a first reading, and thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this will come back, when will this come back?
I believe it is scheduled to come back on the 16th.
On the 16th. Okay, good. Next is the interlocal agreement with Issaquah School District, joint use agreement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are going to run through updates to the interlocal agreement that you knew we were working on with Issaquah School District. Jesse Bond, our Deputy City Manager, is here, along with Mike Sugg, our Management Analyst, our crack Management Analyst. So thank you.
Okay, Lita, we're ready. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and Mr. City Manager. Again, my name is Jessie Bond. I'm the Deputy City Manager. And as our new Parks Director likes to remind me, I'm cleaning up some things that I didn't get done before I vacated my former position. Tonight, we are going to update you on the negotiations with Issaquah School District on the interlocal agreement. You may recall we sent an email on Friday. We were still working through the final terms of the agreement and legal review, but we did provide hard copies last night in an email, so I hope you have all that material. We've been working on this negotiation essentially since the beginning of the year. We did come back and touch base with the council in early April to get direction on a few things. And based on your direction, we have reached a tentative agreement with the district, pending approval, of course, from the city council and the school board. The school board is meeting, as I understand, on May 10th, which is next Wednesday, and we anticipate their approval. I want to take a moment and just pause and say that often when we are in the trenches negotiating agreements like this, particularly with very strong positions on both sides, we scratch our heads and wonder if this is even worth it. It is, and I want to assure you that our relationship with the district is strong, and we both remain committed to shared use facilities and this partnership as well as future partnerships. To recap, our original interlocal agreement was signed on September 21st, 2004. As Councilmember Malchow pointed out at the last meeting, we do need to do a better job of routinely updating these agreements. It's probably somewhere on the 5 to 7 year horizon that these need to be frequently reviewed. So we will be planning to do that. In 2005, we signed an addendum that essentially allowed us to construct the Skyline Community Sports Fields. I will also just pause here and remind you, this is a before and after, and I know I've also been asked recently, was this worth it? And while I wasn't here, I arrived on the scenes right when this field opened. I understand the Skyline Field before was a giant mud pit and didn't get a lot of play. So in the decade that these fields have been open, I would say yes, this partnership was absolutely worth it. Thousands and thousands of hours have been played here that would not have otherwise been possible. The district contributed the land. It's often, we often forget about that, and this is about a 3-acre site, and we provided the capital investment, which at the time was about $2.4 million. We did share the last time we were here that as the partnership has evolved, the high school sports program has needed more time, and we have given that. An initial 30 minutes back to them in 2010, another 45 minutes in 2014 that was tied to the 9th graders returning to the campus. And starting this fall, it was anticipated that additional time would be given back because of the bell time change. Last August, we received a letter from the district, a notice of termination to Addendum 1, which is the partnership on Skyline High School fields. The intent was to basically notify us that the bell change really was going to impact the partnership, and the district didn't think that they could continue to honor the original shared use formula. But they committed to working with us to resolve those issues. In November, we executed a memorandum of understanding with the district. At that time, because we knew we were going to be losing more hours, the district agreed to share 50-50 the cost of the turf replacement project on Skyline Fields. As you may recall, the turf is due to be replaced this summer, and the next agenda item is actually addressing that. At the time, the cost estimate was about $1.4 million. The bids did come in just a little bit below that. The memorandum of understanding also called for the parties to negotiate a new interlocal agreement in 2017, and we've been working on that. Some of the issues, I think you've certainly gotten the flavor. The interlocal agreement hasn't been updated since 2004. We did not include in the original agreement any allowance for reimbursement for capital investments if the agreement was terminated early. The community sports leagues, it's a little confusing. They have to go to us for those fields, but they work through the district for all of the other district fields. And it's fair to say that scheduling and maintaining the Skyline Fields is time consuming for the city staff. All right, so I'm gonna work through these bullets, and this information was included in your packet. Essentially, beyond the base agreement, we have agreed to the following terms on the Skyline Fields. The district is now offering to pay 80% of the turf replacement project. You'll recall we had agreed to 50% when the MOU was executed. This is about $1 million of the project. The specific community use hours have been removed from the agreement to allow more flexibility for the district. This was something that was tough, a hurdle to clear, which is how we ended up with the 80%. The district remains committed, however, to providing community use hours. And I did talk to the district today just to confirm on all of their fields they are currently allowing community use. The hours vary. For example, Pine Lake Middle School doesn't have lights, so outside of school hours they play as long as the light allows for community teams. Under this agreement, the district will now be responsible for scheduling and maintenance. So they're taking over all of the operations on the field. They will also pay for everything. Our share of direct costs was over $26,000 in 2016. That's just our direct costs. I didn't even attempt to calculate our overhead. We have a scheduler that works on this. Certainly a number of our other park staff members works on this field, and we have maintenance staff that are out on the fields periodically supplementing our contracted maintenance. So this is pretty significant change. We also added in an annual reporting requirement so that we can monitor community use, fees collected, and be mindful of any trends that are happening. And then if the district terminates, we added in a clause that would require reimbursement of the depreciated value of the city-funded capital investments for this most recent project. So that is it in a nutshell. And again, I will tell you that there have been compromises on both sides, but from a staff perspective, we feel satisfied with the terms of this proposed agreement.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Jesse, thanks for that presentation. I'm still concerned that there's no specific community use hours, given that they've been encroaching, and that's been their history of encroaching that time. And so I'd like to have some parameters or guardrails set up to ensure that the community hours are respected going forward, especially with the time changes that can occur to their schedules. Additionally, as I had mentioned previously, I would prefer that we maintain the scheduling and maintenance of it. That's something that we've done. They've done it for their sports program, but they haven't done it for the broader community. That's an expertise and knowledge that we have that they don't have, and that'll throw further confusion and I think angst into our citizens. So I would recommend that both those changes be made to the agreement. Thank you.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understood. The second bullet you have here, specific use hours have been removed. Is there a minimum number of hours for the community?
There is not. The district would not agree to those terms, which is what led us back to their offering to pay a larger percentage of the turf replacement project.
I understand that, but we're still paying 20%. So if they effectively give us 10 minutes a day, that's effectively terminating, but it's not terminating. How do we get comfortable that we're not just throwing away that 20%, or what is it, 3 million or 300,000?
So one of the things, this was a tough pill for me to swallow as well. They are taking over all of the operating costs on these fields. They do not schedule community time on the fields. They will be paying for everything. These are expensive facilities to operate and maintain. They are incentivized to schedule community use hours to collect fees to offset these costs. I feel certain that we will get more than 20% community use hours on these fields. It's important to remember that we are one community. The community use groups that are using these fields are well connected to the high school groups. The coaches are crossing between teams, high schools, and community use leagues. Everyone is motivated to get these programs, particularly the youth programs, onto the field. I know there's not a lot of teeth in what I am saying, but this is where we got. This is as far as we could get.
Why don't you mention about the other fields?
Yeah,
Mention about the other fields they have.
The other, yeah, I was just going to bring that up. The other fields that they do operate on their own, they do use for community use as well. And they like to have community use on those fields because it helps offset their costs.
Revenue generators.
Absolutely. And so we would anticipate them to utilize the same model for this particular field as they do for their other fields. So essentially, this was something that we worked long and hard to negotiate. If we don't go forward with this, then they would be responsible for doing the turf replacement on their own, basically, based on direction that we received from the council previously. So
if it turns out to be 80-20, what impact is that going to have on our community hours on a global city basis?
It is going to have an impact. Our use on those fields was, close to 60% last year. But keep in mind, That includes weekends and off-season when we calculate that total use. The real pressure points come during the fall and spring WIA sports seasons, particularly the spring. That is the real, and that is where we are frankly having some challenges, and the district is going to have to resolve those. They have a Title IX claim from the women's softball program regarding inequity in facilities. And the women's softball program plays on the community sports field. It's a shared field. The baseball program, I understand, plays on their own dedicated field. It is the district's responsibility to resolve that. I'm not quite sure their plan, but the spring season is particularly challenging on those fields. And I do think I understand the district's position in terms of needing to control their own destiny in terms of scheduling. High school sports are very complicated. They even have rainouts on these fields. They have playoffs. We do a lot of rejiggering of the schedule as the season's going on, which is very impactful to the groups that have made reservations. They get a call from us and say, by the way, there's a playoff game or a makeup game, you're canceled, the district's on. So that's been going on for the last decade.
I kind of want to go back to my first question. What percentage of use do you think we will get with the revenue generation incentive?
I am pretty optimistic based on my conversation with the district a couple weeks ago that we will see at least 40%. We have already scheduled the fall because
it's a transition.
Right. We schedule typically 6 months ahead of the next sports season, and we essentially lost 30 minutes a day based on the bell time schedule, which will probably, I mean, if they stick with that, I'm not sure they can carry that through the spring. The spring is more challenging, but we would likely be in the 40% range. And so what I would do is, and certainly in coordination with our Parks Director, is we want to monitor this and do whatever we can to make sure those numbers are as high as possible.
Councilmember Malchow.
Thanks. Jesse, thanks for all of your time and energy on this. I can see in your face that this is challenging. So I'm going to echo at least what's already been said here to some degree. You know, I think I'm willing to put my faith in this agreement, but I do have some questions and some concerns, and those are regarding the community field use. And what lever do we have if that drops to a level that is unacceptable?
Not a strong lever, except that we have talked with the district, and I don't want to get in front of the council or the pro plan work here about future partnerships. We really think that our role could be working with the district to identify fields where we could make an investment to expand capacity. For example, a field that has turf right now with no lights. There are 3 sites. The district is very interested in our partnership to continue work on these fields. And even though there's been some tension with this, I do believe they're incentivized to be a good partner to the city. We work on a lot of other projects besides the fields. So I know this doesn't have the specific hours called out, but I feel that they're committed to their word at this point.
I would hope so. I think my concern is that, you know, if we're using 60 some odd % of those fields as far as percentage of time now, and we're hoping, crossing our fingers, that we're going to get 40, right, that 20 some odd % that we're losing, right, where are those teams going to go? I mean, we've already heard from teams that there's just not enough community field use, and that's my concern, is that they're going to start showing up here saying, I need a place to play lacrosse, soccer, whatever it is. And so I think that's my real concern with not having that control. The other thing I wanted to bring up is in the agreement, the Issaquah School District will now be responsible for all the maintenance. So we have the dollar figure, which I think was quoted at $26,000 for maintenance, but how does that translate for staffing? So we made some assumptions as a council on our part for the budget and added people. What does that do to this? Are we overstaffed if this goes forward?
We actually provide maintenance on these fields by contract almost exclusively.
Okay.
Our staff are out doing field inspections, occasionally supplementing if a goal needs to be moved or something, replacing a net. And actually, I want to clarify, the city share of the direct costs was $26,000, so you have to do the math. I think the total maintenance cost, direct cost, was about $40,000.
Okay.
And one important note, we have a halftime scheduler. So we have somebody, Belle, you've probably met her. She schedules all of our facilities, the fields, the Beaver Lake Lodge, and the picnic shelters. The district is scheduling a lot more facilities than we are, so they are actually set up it's going to be a blip on their radar to take this over. Important reminder about synthetic turf fields is the turf replacement is not inexpensive. It's really imperative that the owner and operator of the fields maintain the turf properly to get the longest life. And so the district is maintaining a number of synthetic turf fields, far more than we are. I would say they probably have the same level of expertise. And they are incentivized to maintain them at a certain level to get the longest use out of them, likely 8 to 10 years. So they can't, these fields also have to pass, we talked about this in the next agenda bill, compaction testing. If you're not maintaining them, they're not going to pass, and then the fields close. It's a little different than some of our other facilities. There's a lot of restrictions on their maintenance and care.
Okay. I hate to come back to this, but it's back to the community field use and that, percentage of our teams that will no longer have, field time there. Where are they going to go? I mean, that's not a rhetorical question. Literally, where are they going to go?
I don't have a good answer for you right now. The deficit certainly existed before the bell time changed.
Yeah.
And even worse, we know Eastlake is also going to be changing their bell time, and we're going to have the same conversation in about a year on those fields. I haven't seen the survey results yet for the pro plan, but I know we asked a question about athletic fields, and I think we should really take a close look at this athletic field program and where opportunities exist to improve fields.
Yeah.
And I do think there are some opportunities in the pipeline.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's probably unfortunate, the timing that we did the survey for the pro plan in advance of this happening, because the impact won't be felt for some time, since you said the fall's already scheduled. So, anyway.
Right.
Councilmember Odell.
Well, I too share Christie's concerns about where people are going to go. As I heard it, we're looking at about a 50% decrease in hours, or 30% decrease in hours. And your point about Eastlake as well taken as too. Eastlake is going to have to do this. I'm not sure we can count on middle schools being the ultimate answer either, because they are either going to be expanded into what are currently fields, or they're going to be double shifting, which will have the same effect on the middle school fields as on the high school fields. So what we have here is a problem begging a solution, and it's got to be a holistic one. We may be well advised to look at a more global conversation with the two major school districts in our area, and even the third one. I don't know what they have. About, well, maybe they have a field in the city, I don't know, or close by. But this is a problem, looking for a solution, as I hear you. The question was asked too about head count. There's got to be an knock-on effect on staff here as well. I mean, if we're not scheduling it, the half-time person that you mentioned, I guess, is in question, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would actually caution you on that a bit. That, as I mentioned, that person is scheduling all of our facilities, and it's halftime. One of the things we have not had the capacity to do is any marketing. So you may recall I was in front of you talking about fees, and you had asked, are you marketing the Beaver Lake Lodge? No, we're not aggressively. So with this moving off of our plate, I think Angie and her team will be tasked with reevaluating that position and possibly picking up some of those items that we have not been able to focus on because of the volume of scheduling.
And perhaps the 2 rooms in the community center. I don't know, I see that we're kind of between a rock and a hard place here. But we are putting ourselves at the discretion of the athletic director at Skyline. And there's a track record there. And also, in the future, leaving ourselves vulnerable to the sports program at Eastlake. You know, maybe you should talk to Eastside Catholic, I don't know, but
Okay.
the issue is...
It's a tough one. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, thank you. Jesse, you were putting your faith into 60/40. I'm just curious, given Pine Lakes Middle School, first of all, Pine Lake Middle School, they refused to work with us on the lights to extend the hours. Now those kids are also shifting over to Skyline because they don't have enough hours to work. What percentage of the time are we getting of Pine Lake Middle School for community hours?
I don't have those numbers offhand. It's fairly limited, though. Those lights, those fields are not lit. So
They didn't allow us to put the conduits there when we offered to do
actually,
that.
my understanding is the conduit's in place. They need to talk about lighting. There are 3 sites, the district, Beaver Lake Middle School, Pacific Cascade, and Pine Lake. They have recently turfed all 3 of those fields with no lights. There's capacity opportunities there. I'm mindful of not getting in front of the district, though. I think they have their own policy issues to work through. And if they reach a point where they are interested in considering lights, and I think that may be coming sooner than later, I would advise we talk to them about a partnership, a capital investment to expand use. It's fairly significant when you add lights to a field in terms of expanding use. On the other side, we know of at least one middle school where it's Inglewood that Lake Washington has given us permission to study the opportunity to upgrade that field. And I believe if it's not on the park CIP, it's in the queue for consideration. So we have some opportunities.
But the Inglewood one is based upon the old hours that you just mentioned may shift as well and have effect onto that. And that's a tremendous concern to all of us as to what that does. Because as was mentioned, all of the citizens come and say, we don't have enough sports field here. I mean, we've heard that both the artificial turf and the natural turf that we're in shortage of. And looking at this, it's forcing us to go into the indoor fields that was supposed to supplement and may not have been able to fill the needs before. And now, even with that field, we'll still be short, is what I'm hearing here. So this is basically forcing that decision to come down on the council in that direction to address a large shortage. I don't know how you can do this deal without having visibility over the hours. And again, I go back to the scheduling staying here so that we can at least have those reports and be able to see how we're being able to address the community use of field. So that's still something that I believe that we should insist upon. And I think that, yeah,
Councilmember Veraldra, I will point out that we do have a requirement in there that we do get annual reporting requirements.
Oh, I understand.
That,
There's a difference between being here and scheduling it and being able to report to us much more quickly than asking them on a quarterly basis or monthly basis.
If we do see an issue, I will say that, we will try our very best to have conversation with the district, with the superintendent, with their operations people, if we feel that we're not getting our share, as it were, for community use. And we will flow back to the council and let you know that we're experiencing this.
No. And then reiterating that if that's the case, as it sounds like that they want to go to, then I would join Councilmember Odell and Councilmember Malchow in the comments. Then that staff seems to be redundant, especially in this circumstances that we're now entering into discussions, that we'd have to take a hard look at that person as well as all other staff.
Right.
Thank you.
Just a
Mayor
quick
Keller.
comment. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick reflection. I think it was 2008 or 2009, we did a ball field study where we looked at all the fields in the city and identified a priority list of opportunities to expand capacity, and it looked different for all the fields. Based on the outcomes of the PRO plan, and I think we'll see some preliminary data next week, if it shows a strong need for athletic fields, we can certainly dive into that sooner than later. But I would, again, I think, and Angie's not here tonight, put all the fields back on the table, look at what capacity is at, what the opportunity is to expand capacity, and start looking at cost benefit. And we can do that work sooner than later.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just quick comments, because I think most of the concerns and the questions have been asked prior to my turn here. But thank you, Jesse, for the negotiations that went on with this. We started talking about this before, about the contracts and what they look like. And I'm reminded all the time that really this was started, the conversation we're having right now, because the school districts canceled their contracts with us because they're changing their bell times, because it improves the educations of the kids when they start their time and when they work. I mean, these are our kids, this is our community, and it's very complicated about adjusting the time for the kids in school versus the community use, you know, outside of that. So it sounds to me like the timing is really good, that the PRO plan is in place, and we're going to get some results, because it sounds like we're going to need some more, possibly need some more capacity. And I trust that the staff is already, as you've alluded to, already looking for other opportunities wherever we can to maximize them. So a difficult situation at best, but you know, the fields are worn out because the kids that are growing up in our community are using them. I guess that's really a positive look at this high cost, and the school district is picking up, you know, $1 million in cost that, well, or $500,000 in cost that maybe they hadn't been picking up before, that we can use for that need if we have a deficit that comes up through the PRO plan. The other question I have about the scheduling, that it was experience. I think I kind of I have concerns about losing touch with the community if we give up the scheduling, because then we're not actually working with those organizations outside of the schools. But on the other hand, as you're saying, the schools would be better at that scheduling, that maybe that time saved is really a positive situation. So more comment on, looks like we have to wait and see how this plays out.
It is. I hear what you're saying. I really do, about controlling the scheduling. The way we're scheduling these fields, though, is very inefficient. And I'm also mindful of trying to move us towards a more efficient proposal. The district has the ability, they have an entire suite of fields. So when one field change happens, they have the ability to move teams to other sites where we don't. We're really stuck with, on this side of the city, the south side, the Skyline fields. So I do think from an efficiency perspective, it makes more sense for the leagues to work directly with the school district for scheduling these fields.
Just one final comment is, these fields are expensive. They are very expensive. You know, there's the question is, can we really afford to have a lot of these fields around? And I'm sure the school districts ask that question. So I'm hoping, based on some of the comments that were made by Councilmember Hornish, that they are very much incentivized to reach out to the community and keep these fields full themselves, to defer their costs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I totally agree with you. And as the Deputy Mayor pointed out, these are the same kids that are in the schools, that are in the sports clubs. There are children here. The clear answer is that we don't have enough fields, or too many kids.
Yes and yes.
And so indeed, the PRO plan, what are we going to do? We can continue working with the school districts on joint use, or we can go out in a very expensive way, go to Soaring Eagle Park and say, hey, we got 30 acres there. That's an expensive solution. We should look at the other solutions first. So I was really enthused about this agreement. I see the district as being more capable of handling the maintenance and the scheduling. They're picking up the bulk of the cost of the replacement. quite frankly, we're in a position where they could simply say, okay, we're taking them over, we're taking over everything. And I think they want to continue to work with us and look at some other fields. So I am very supportive of this as it's presented to us. I think we're ready for a motion. Is anybody ready to make a motion?
I'll move.
Okay.
I move to authorize the city manager to execute the revised interlocal agreement in Exhibit 1 with the Issaquah School District.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Seeing no further discussion, Councilmember
I
Hornish.
want to say one thing. We're here to set policy. We set policy to do a partnership. I think staff did the best they could in the negotiations, so I'm fully supportive of this. I think there's a bigger policy discussion for us to think about, and it's going to be in the pro plan and what we, I mean, there's really a policy question. Do we want to do a partnership, or do we want to control our own destiny and have our own fields? But I'll throw it out.
Agree.
Good. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote of 6-0, it's approved. Thank you very much, Jesse. Now, I think you're staying there for the next one, too?
Well, I'll ask a question. We do have a PowerPoint tonight. Anjali Meyer is here from the Parks Department. If you'd like to go through the Skyline Turf Replacement Project, or if you have enough materials and information, we can skip the PowerPoint.
What do you think? We're down to 20% of the cost anyway.
Exactly. Let's skip the PowerPoint.
Should we skip the PowerPoint?
But, yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So with that, this is the bid award for the Skyline Community Field Turf Replacement Project. And I'm fumbling now because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
We have them in the packet.
absolutely. We did come in a little bit below bid. We are on a tight timeline. The turf needs to be replaced this summer. We're concerned that the fields will not pass compaction test beyond the summer season. We have agreed as part of the transition that the city will continue to be the project administrator for this construction project, and the district will reimburse us for 80% of the costs.
Okay, Councilmember Malchow.
Yeah, just one quick note. There appears to be a small typo or something was overlooked in the bill on, I think would be page 3. It says 50% in there for the cost. It's talking about per the MOU, I know, but it's saying that the district will each be responsible for half, and that was obviously.
To keep the park staff on their toes, they submitted their material before we had the terms of the interlocal agreement finalized. So the interlocal does supersede what's in your packet on that item.
Okay.
Good catch, though.
Yeah, I'm happy to move this unless there's more discussion.
Okay, go for it.
All right. I would move to accept the bid from Coast to Coast Turf as the lowest responsive and responsive bid for the Skyline Community Fields. Just lost my place.
Do we have a
here.
second?
Second.
Further discussion? Councilmember Malchow?
Nope, sorry, my light was still on.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
By your vote of 6-0, it is approved. Thank you very much, Anjali. Good job.
Like the presentation.
Okay. Now we have a Public Works update. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you. We have Steve Liniszewski here to bring us up to date on what's going on in Public Works, and with him is Cheryl Paston, his Deputy Public Works Director.
Good evening again, Council. Few remaining citizens, one remaining staff member. Steve Liniszewski, Public Works Director, Cheryl Paston, Deputy Director. So we were asked to provide a quarterly update for Public Works. So quarter was over in March. We're a little delayed, but we are here nonetheless. I apologize in advance. I have a cold. I may not be as jovial as normal. And it's the latest we've been in a while, so anyway. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share what's been going on with Public Works. Briefly, we'll go over staffing updates, private development activities, city CIP projects, transportation planning and other efforts, and stormwater capital and planning efforts. It has been a pretty rigorous hiring activity level in Public Works starting at the end of last year. Currently, we actually just moved the storm team to the second floor. As I'm sure Jesse has advised, there's not a lot of room, so we have moved the entire storm team upstairs. So we're all getting our steps. Our new associate traffic engineer started in April, so she's working directly with Stephen Chen, and they are working very well together. She's very nice, very competent, very capable, and a go-getter. So we found a good fit, and I can say the exact same for Danica, the new associate stormwater engineer. Just great personalities, great work ethic, and already photos that we can use, especially Danica, where she's looking down a 12-foot culvert and just fits right in with the group. So I'm pleased to have her. Dan Johnson is now our stream and stormwater supervisor. He was previously we reorganized the department a little bit, so he was a different role, but now he's in charge of streets and storm. Construction inspector, we had a retirement of Patty last year, so we're filling that position. We're down to the final candidate selection. Engineering department, or Public Works, is getting a management analyst position, which we are in the process of hiring as well. We are converting some other roles in Public Works where we'll have a street and stormwater lead. That was an internal application pool, and that should be finalized soon. We've hired 3 new maintenance ones. We still have 2 vacancies, and we have 1 more Public Works Maintenance 2 vacancy. A little update on private development activities that we are responsible for participating in. There's currently 18 active developments going on. I put plus or minus because that changes fairly regularly, but nonetheless, 18 going on. We have 2 inspectors right now, so the third will be very handy because we're also involved with inspecting the East Lake Sammamish Trail and the current construction of Phase 2A. We are overseeing the review, as you're aware, of Phase 2B and its SSDP. It's not to engineering design yet, but we have been involved with Tawny as well as a consultant to get ahead of that project and try to be as astute as we can in trying to identify issues. Under other here, we also have Pine Lake Middle School. I'm sure you are all aware that they are rebuilding that facility. So they propose to rebuild that on the lower fields and then flip-flop the site. Margaret Mead is the same, up near kind of the southwest side of Sahali. For some of the NPDES reporting we have to do, these numbers are fairly handy. So in 2016, we reviewed 1,366 permits. So that is a single-family residential permit and or a subdivision application. We do not differentiate. So that's a lot of permits out of 2 staff review engineers. And already for this quarter, if you take the average, we will eclipse last year's rate. So we're watching that, making sure they're not drowning. We do have consultant support in the budget, which we do utilize, but it's still very fast-paced in that group. Last slide on construction development activities. Hope you are all aware that we do have a new development activity map. So the online blue boarding, as I think it's been coined. A lot of comments last year and a lot of activity and support from council, city manager's office, and staff developing this. And if you will bear with me, I will activate it, which we have a little bit of a hard time sharing screens here. Somebody killed it. Man. All right. So if you'll notice the little colors, they do indicate and are correlated to So right in the center of the screen, purple identifies a preliminary plat. So if you click on that, it will give you some particulars on the project. Contact information, a brief description of what's happening. So that is very handy. We do hope soon to add capital projects to this list as well. The trail is on here because it is an active development project. But again, we do hope to add capital to this in the near future.
Wait, Steve, can
Yes,
you
sir.
go back there real quick?
You mean add city projects?
Yeah, where you would have a solid, whatever color we choose line for 4th Avenue. You would click that and it would give you maybe some particulars.
Great.
Project cost estimate if it's not contracted yet, any grants,
Wonderful.
what it is. So
Tom?
And when I
That's a
was
goal.
playing with this, I wanted to make sure I understood. These are applications and not issued. When it goes issued, do we put it on this map?
So
Final.
not knowing exactly what you're asking, when it's issued as far as a construction permit,
Yeah,
they're on here too.
they are.
So you have this, this brown color is in the final plat stage, which means it went through P-plat, it's been constructed, they're ready to be individualized, become individualized lots.
Does that mean
So-
final plat approved?
Correct. Not sure if it means approved or not. I can check though. Let's click a brown one.
Well, and because I'm so familiar with the trail, why isn't this south segment of the trail there as showing an active permit then?
Good point.
So I do believe, and Cheryl can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe these are planning terminologies. So if it's through the planning phase and now into construction phase, city capital projects and then some of the other capital projects that aren't plat related don't have another step. So we could make them on some, give them a legend and identify them. But this is still the early phase of developing this map.
Well, and I think that's what we wanted to give
Yeah.
notice to so people can comment. By the time you start construction, it's too late to comment.
Right.
It's
Which
still
is-
kind of good information though, when somebody sees
yeah,
the
I completely
bulldozers go
agree.
out. You might think about it, but
Yep.
it's
No,
a
I
capacity
think
thing.
all construction activity, whether people had an opportunity to comment or not, is something they may want to just check into.
It's still good communication.
Yep, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, we can add that too. So those are the goals. It's coming along, and so Beth out of Cheryl's group has been invited to speak at next week's conference, statewide conference on GIS, and this is going to be showcased not only with City of Sammamish, but AWC Consortium kind of going out on their own. So
Steve?
it's pretty exciting. Yes, sir.
I've got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
That I'm on the
Hey.
board.
Mr. Valderrama.
Yeah, so Steve, a question. You just showed the summary of the variances that have been given and the ones denied. And then I noticed on this chart you have under pink the zoning variances, or you used to be able to notice it until you scrolled up. If you scroll down on that legend on the same, no.
You're talking about the PowerPoint?
No,
No, go back to where you were, right there. Now just scroll down, you see the zoning variances
okay.
that you have in pink? So in the prior chart, before you saw it showed Sean Spicer, you had the summary, and as you look at that summary, I assume that that's a cumulative of the pinks here. If I go into one of the pink variance zones on this map, would I see more specifics to the variance that was given? So if someone taps into there, can they see the description of what was the variance that was actually applied and why? That was it now.
Doesn't look like it.
there it is.
Oh, there.
No, not really.
Not a lot.
Yeah, it'd be advantageous if we could put a description there of a couple of sentences so that people can go back, because that's one thing everybody's asking for, is to understand the variances during the application process that are being considered by the applicant.
Variations.
So variation table I have not gotten to from Public Works Engineering Variations, which is on the same slide in PowerPoint. Councilmember Valderrama, you were actually specifically asking about this. I clicked onto with a zoning variance.
Variance, but I think what
Yeah.
you mean is variation.
Variations are not on here.
Yeah.
No. So
Okay,
planning
variances.
related.
So the variations would be the
is.
one that we need to have here, descriptions, so that citizens going, because that's what they're clamoring for, is to get some heads up on that.
But it's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
We are working on getting those entered into the Trackit system, so people could actually look that up.
Okay.
So it is, as we've said before, this is a soft launch, and we are making continuous improvements to it. So your comments are helpful.
Okay.
Member Odell?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering what happened to Connor Jarvis.
It's under construction, so it was passed.
It wasn't on the map, though.
Well, also, it's a timing issue.
Yeah, well, neither is Highcroft.
Yeah.
Those are in the
Those are
past,
platted.
and we are moving forward. We have not moved back.
Okay.
Oh, this is
All right, zipping back into the PowerPoint.
I always enjoy this photo here.
we have the calming Zen effect.
So that was the activity map. I hope everybody's a little bit excited, and it will become more useful as we move on, but we're very glad to have something out there. It's my understanding deviations and variations are of high interest, so here is a summary. And just for brief description, deviation is the new terminology that supersedes previous variations to the Public Works Standard. So if it was 2006 project, or 2016 prior invested, it falls under the variation protocol. If it's somebody who's a new applicant and becomes vested after 2000 adoption of the 16 standards, which was January 1st, they go into the deviation summary. We treat them both as the same because they are effectively the same, how we track them, but nonetheless, I just wanted to share the definitions. A little history, 2015, it looks like we issued 27 and denied 1. This does not take into account the anecdotal ones that were received and dropped. So they weren't decided on a yes or no. The applicant just withdrew them for what reason or another, and we don't have any data on that in our file. So 2016 was a low year. 4 were issued, 1 denied, and then there were a handful dropped. This year we have 8 issued and 1 denied. After last summer's open house on community, what do we call that one? It wasn't community development, just community open house. It was fairly well received that saving trees and making those accommodations was a high priority. So a handful of the deviations we have or variations we have approved are taking into consideration either eliminating a landscape strip or moving the sidewalks so we can save trees. It just made better sense to us to not have street trees planted at a 30-foot center when you can keep the existing growth of whatever's there on a 36-inch caliper fir or whatever else exists. There are a handful of those. One here that's stacked up just out of the 8. Pine Lake Middle School is responsible for 3 because they are adjacent to 8-foot sidewalk on one side and some existing facilities. We didn't feel it warranted pulling some of those out where you would also then encroach in on some tree canopy along 228th. So those are some of the decisions we made on those variation approvals. So there are not a lot, but the bulk of them are sensitive area related. When we do narrow the road section from something old, which would meet the new standard, we do not vary the right-of-way width. I know that was important.
I will offer the statement that in many cases, or most cases, the public thinks that if we have made a deviation or a variation, we've done that, and whatever we've done is with the intention or has the result of harming the environment. But in reality, the deviations and variations that are being made are basically to preserve the environment and to help that case.
But I think that's an important point that Lyman has raised and is often missed, but by documenting them and having it
yes.
in, it would give that visibility to help address that issue.
Exactly.
So going forward, I would hope that that be entered in on each one of these.
Yep, that is the intent. Because the reality is much different than the perception.
Yeah, every variation or deviation doesn't fit into a specified compartment. I would like, maybe 5 key indicators that we could sort and query by. Sometimes it just doesn't fall into that, but we do want to have that. So that would be something very powerful, I believe. We'll touch on some CIP projects. So Lewis Thompson Hill Road slide repair. We are still down to signalized one-way emergency status. That will close fully, we expect, and we'll do advertising late this week for next week, the 11th. The bids open right before the next council meeting, Oh, I'm on Lewis Thompson Hill Road. Oh, slide repair, we just passed that tonight, so we'll go into design, sorry. Thank you, Cheryl. Issaquah Falls City Road, moving forward, we have an open house on the 1st over at Pacific Cascade Middle School. Southeast 4th is further along than 90% per se, but we have been tinkering with this little task for a couple weeks here. We have a lot of right-of-way work. We actually have some executive session work tonight on the right-of-way acquisition for 4th. So Jim and the group is working diligently on that project. Sidewalk and ADA enhancements for overlay were opened and passed tonight. Snake Hill, that bid will be out and opened, I believe it's next week, the week after next. We propose to have a council packet item that will not identify a low bid contractor or the amount, just because by the time we open it and vet it, we will not have that time. But we will bring the pertinent information to the meeting because we want to get that project under construction as soon as possible based on its emergency failure status. So we hope everybody's okay with that. Citywide overlay opens up soon too, so that should be on the 6th meeting. And
Steve, a
Yes,
comment on the overlay. If we review our streets and we find that we don't have $3 million worth of overlay for this year, we can set aside the money in a reserve rather than overlaying a street that doesn't need overlaying at this point.
Yeah, so I have talked to the city manager about that specific element. If council's direction annually is going to be to spend $3.5 million on asphalt overlay, we probably need to plan, because at some point we're going to do 228th, right? And it's going to cost you more than $3 million or $3.5 million. So we will need to either have a shorter year and set aside some for the following year.
Exactly.
But it seems to me that it's an important task for you all, so we may rejigger that and how it looks in the budget, with some guidance from maybe Finance Committee and obviously City Manager's Office.
Yeah,
but-
we won't overlay something that doesn't need to be overlaid.
Yeah.
Just to spend the money.
Yeah.
28th may happen sooner than later.
The reason I bring it up is I did get a comment from a citizen that felt that there was a certain road that got overlaid that really looked pretty good to that citizen
Yeah.
beforehand. And we did go through that, as you recall, Tom, some years ago when we were doing overlay over on Southeast 24th. Tom and I drove the road and decided that the whole road didn't need overlaying. So it's probably destroyed by now.
Might be ready now.
There are definitely roadways that do need to be overlaid in
Yes.
Sammamish, so.
And a pothole down there at Southeast 4th.
We will bring forward the list. There's one that you pointed out earlier. We'll get on that this week.
Been reported to the car system, so.
Yeah, I hit it.
And then we have a small sidewalk gap project going out to bid that should come to you in early June as well. So Lewis Thompson Hill Road, going to provide retaining wall, storm drain improvements, relocate the stormwater outfall, as well as provide new paving and then guardrail. Everybody's aware where that project is. So Snake Hill is out to bid. We were a little concerned with a kind of a compressed timeline on the bid length, but we have, I think, 10 registered bidders now. We had a new one today, so that is a great sign. It's a good time to bid and a good time to get the work out there. So that should be, we have high hopes. I know the crew is excited to not have to be out there and maintaining that on a major basis twice a year. So, and then overlay is out. We do have 8 neighborhoods, 14 lane miles of paving, so that's each direction. And then 14% of that is in the Klahani area, so that is a pretty matched element of the city and its proportion. Inglewood Hill is almost complete. It's very, very close, final punch list items, and we're adding some handrails in some areas that may have had some steeper and taller drops than were anticipated, just based on existing topography. Sidewalk program and ADA retrofits is underway as of tonight, and we have completed the 2016 asphalt overlay work. So we had to stop that at the end of last year due to weather. So that has been finalized this year. And ITS will come in June for project closeout. So sidewalk gap projects, I know that's an important topic to the group. We do hope the TMP will help guide us in a little more strategic analysis and then tact for attacking the gaps. But 212th and the 220 and the Southeast 24th path are on the list for this year. They will be done this summer. A couple of projects maybe to be determined. 212th between Ebright Creek Park and Southeast 11th-ish block, the Chestnut Estates section. At this point, that after this summer, that will be the only gap on 212th from 24th all the way to the north. So gap filling is a high priority for the gap projects, hence the name. There's a few short sections on Inglewood Hill Road that don't exist from East Lake Sammamish up to the 228th intersection. And then Southeast 24th, and I say Southeast 24th and 212th, we had a bevy of requests on those in the last 9 months overall. So Southeast 24th is fairly well situated from 244th back to the west to 228th. But there's a pretty significant gap between 244th and 248th where there's some new subdivisions that popped up. So that makes sense to be a gap project as well. And those, correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that not waiting for the TMP may be some wishes of the council. So we can come back on a night for a direct discussion on this with a little more deeper details. Does that make sense? I see some head nods.
Councilmember Melchow.
I have a question actually back on the previous slide. On the ITS, I think when we were meeting as a transportation committee, we had identified some shortcomings of the ITS system like fog and sunlight. Can you maybe give us an update if we're actively doing anything with regards to ITS, or it's just kind of, it is what it is? Because I know sometimes I still sit at the left arrow for cycle after cycle and wonder.
Cheryl may want to add some, but sure, we have had significant reduction in requests or issues.
Okay.
Not that they don't pop up. We lost a phase on Southeast 4th, coming down Southeast 4th, eastbound at the 220th intersection. Just Stephen went on had a personal day, and Isabel's, I don't know if it was her first or second day in the office, and we all came rushing over to her.
It was her first day, and she stepped right into it and fixed it. She was amazing.
It's great.
Things do crop up. We have not had those, so if you get them, report them. I don't know if Cheryl has any insight into
That's the intersection I was thinking of in my head too, incidentally.
Yeah, and everything has been acquired to be redundant with loops as well as the cameras.
Okay.
So we have not had fog issues. It's been too wet for fog. We've been lucky, I guess. So yeah.
We certainly haven't had any sun issues, have we?
We're watching it. Yeah. We had some money in the budget to work on our what do we call our transportation command center or traffic control? Yeah. Traffic management center. So right now, again, Stephen looks on his laptop or Isabel's desktop. So we're hopeful to get some bigger screens for them to be able to do their work in a more efficient way rather than zooming and staring and wasting time, kind of getting deep on there. So outside of that, we have not had a lot of complaints.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And we are...
Christy also mentioned the flashing yellow.
Yes.
No, Tom Hornish did.
That is on our to-do list. So we're finalizing the analysis. It's not, I'm sure, as ambitious as maybe everybody had hoped for. You know, sight distance and each intersection has to be analyzed from all directions. So some will work, some will not. Some are engineering discretion. So we're just finalizing the discretion and trying to move forward.
Remember, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Now back to the slide you were just on, the sidewalk gap. When you were asking council outside of the TMP on some of these gap projects, this next project list, I know there's not a ton of money in that gap project list for any given year. I mean, are we going to prioritize these here? I'm looking at that Southeast 24th, and I know that there's an issue there that's a hill, and it's right by Beaver Lake Park, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that draws my attention.
Especially walking on the side of the shoulder after, what's the Halloween event there? Sorry.
The Nightmare at Beaver Lake,
right?
and I'm a van driver there, and
Right, me
it
too.
scares the living daylights out of me driving right there. So yeah, that one.
To.
No, my driving's not supposed to scare you. So, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely an affirmative on wanting to bring up some of these gap projects in advance of the TMP.
Councilmember Odell.
Hey, Stu, back on the ITS issue, is there anything new on the 202 application?
PSRC? The Puget Sound Regional Council application, or are you talking about the direct appropriation and the budget?
Well, was it a joint application by us and some other people for putting ITS on 202?
So we were awarded that it was actually a partial grant. There's still a little bit in construction that we had to leave on the table because there were so many projects that were being requested. But PSRC is pretty confident that they'll be able to provide funding for our entire request.
Okay.
But that was not a current, sorry.
Timing on that would be when then?
That was 18 money, I think.
Yes, we will start the work next year in 2018.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just a little zoomed in element of 212th and the gravel path on 24th. We actually combined that bid. We thought it would make good sense to have one contractor do that and not have two contractors in a small area fighting for road, lane closures, detours, and whatnot. So we're going to put that bid out for those projects together. And now you get to hear Cheryl for a bit and talk about transportation long-range planning.
All right, good evening all. So I'll talk a little bit about projects that are further out and where we have to do quite a bit of planning. Here's a list of the major projects that Public Works is involved with. Transportation Master Plan, we came to you, I think, a week ago or so to request approval to hire Fair and Piers. So I'll give you a little bit more information about that, but I'll be pretty brief. We are also updating the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. It's mostly some housekeeping that we need to bring forward to you. I believe we're going to the Planning Commission in July, and then in June, and then we'll bring the revisions to you for approval. We're also assisting community development with their urban forestry management plan, or urban forestry plan, and then we're also coordinating with parks on their pro plan update and then their land acquisition strategy plan. So the next couple of slides, I'll just briefly touch again on the TMP. Again, the time horizon is 2018 to 2035. The rest of the bullet items, again, you've seen these before. These are the key deliverables that will be outcomes of the TMP scope. The near term, on the next slide, is our near-term activities. So we do have our project kickoff tomorrow, which we're really excited about. And then between roughly May and July, we will start conducting stakeholder interviews, of which you all will be invited. So you'll have to look for some meetings on your calendar that Debbie will be sending. We'll develop a project website. The consultant will be developing a detailed communications and outreach plan, and then we'll begin the development of the 2035 traffic model. The third quarter, probably early in the third quarter, we'll have our first pop-up studio, and that was explained in the consultant scope. We're pretty excited about that as well. We are coordinating with parks with, they have, I don't know, something like 85 activities and events or something that the city's involved with over the spring into late summer. So we will be coordinating with those events because we definitely want to go where the people are naturally congregating, either because they're shopping or because of a city-sponsored event. I'm going to shift a little bit to the stormwater system. I think you've probably seen some of these numbers over, especially last year when we were going through the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan and the Stormwater Code updates. We have a number of ponds and vaults. You'll see there the stormwater filters. Actually, it's probably going to increase by several hundred definitely by the end of this year as we take on ownership of the facilities that private development has installed. You see 11,500 catch basins, roughly 164 miles of stormwater pipes. And I'll note that the catch basins and the miles of pipes are actually conservative numbers because we've got a backlog of projects that we need to digitize and enter into GIS. Kind of wanted to give you a little preview of our, what we call our Storm Bandit map. Not sure why we call it that, but it's a GIS layer that shows all of our stormwater assets, both publicly owned and privately owned. So I think we'll get there in a minute. So this is one of the products that our GIS staff are responsible for developing and maintaining. I want to put a plug in for our GIS staff. We have all of 2 people. They do a lot of work behind the scenes to create maps and keep the data up to date. So here you'll see there's little blue dots. Those are the catch basins. The arrow is the direction of flow. There are ponds that are mapped out in GIS. It's very helpful for a range of things, for just general maintenance, for responding to spills, for emergency response. We get a lot of questions from developer and consultant engineers saying, what kinds of facilities do you have in the general area of their project? So the city staff, the general public rely quite heavily on the GIS data. Mm-hmm. Other activities going on under the stormwater planning heading. We have our stormwater rate study that is underway right now. I'll talk a little bit more of the first 4 items here in the next few slides. We have a water quality monitoring strategic plan. We're going to be starting our Zakus Basin planning, and then a considerable amount of our time, both on the engineering side and in maintenance and operations, spent on NPDES permit compliance. The 5th item, I hope this is on your calendars. There's the annual Kokanee Fry Release celebration next week, I believe.
It's on the city manager's calendar.
Yes, it
Oh,
is.
great. That's on the city's manager. Well, we hope to see you all there. It's a fun event. The kids come out. They have a good time. They all release their little fry and say goodbye and send them on down the stream. So our surface water management rate study, we're negotiating a consultant contract right now. It's really an update of the work that was done in 2012. You'll see the items listed there are the same tasks that the consultant conducted in 2012 and really the same ones that they also did in 2008. We're going to go with the same consultant that'll streamline the work. They already, are familiar with our rate model, for example, our capital facilities charges and our system. And then we plan to present our findings to council in July along with the stormwater capital projects list. The water quality monitoring strategic plan is an activity that we proposed in the stormwater comprehensive plan that was approved last year. We will be hiring a consultant in the 3rd quarter of this year. We'll work with the community and the council, planning commission, and our other stakeholders to develop the desired goals and outcomes of the plan. We'll need to document the current conditions, identify the monitoring needs for all the water bodies in the area. We definitely will need to really understand and describe what the current regulatory framework is and looking forward what we think some of the changes might be, because they do both at the state level and our own codes really influence a lot what we want to do with our water resources and what we're permitted to do. And then of course we'll develop recommendations. For the Zakus Basin Plan, that'll be our first basin plan that we've done in quite a few years, actually. So we're looking forward to that. There's been certainly a lot of interest in the basin and certainly the Zakus Creek project in particular. Again, we're going to hire a consultant in the 3rd quarter. We're going to be pretty busy then. Some of the activities we'll need to do is to inventory the assets in the basin and then certainly map them, make sure they're on our GIS layer. We'll identify areas in need of repair, whether they're flooding problems or undersized pipe systems, or just enhancement of the creek itself, other than what we're doing right now for the Zakus project. We'll identify project planning scopes, cost and schedule estimates, certainly do the public education and outreach, and then develop a monitoring plan. And then we'll move on to the next basin, one of which will be the Laughing Jacobs Basin, which is quite a bit larger. That one will take a lot longer than the Zaccoose Basin will.
That's mostly in Issaquah.
There's a considerable amount of Laughing Jacobs that is in the city. So we will be coordinating, though, with Issaquah.
Okay,
You're correct.
good.
And then I guess our favorite program, which really does dictate quite a bit of our staff time and our resources, is the NPDES permit. As you all are aware, education and outreach is a significant activity that we undertake, and that's actually a really fun one because we have opportunities to educate the kids all the way up to their parents, adults, businesses, and so that's actually a really fun opportunity that we can take to continue to help people understand what we're trying to protect and what assets they have in their backyards. There are other activities that we do on the operations side. We have to inspect all of our storm ponds and vaults, and then we work with the owners of the private facilities to make sure that they maintain their facilities so that they're functioning as designed. Of course, we do water quality monitoring. It's quite a bit of code compliance, not just public works, but community development is certainly involved there, and as well as parks. We are gearing up to negotiate, I'll put that in quotes, I guess discuss the next permit with the Department of Ecology and other permittees in the Phase 2 program. I'll move on to the stormwater capital projects. These are our primary projects in the stormwater fund. Of course, the Zaccoose Creek project, we're roughly at about 20% design. Lewis-Thompson Hill Road, we're planning to do some small drainage improvements, and not to confuse this with the Lewis-Thompson Hill slope stabilization project. That's a completely separate project. But we did want to try to make some improvements while we are working on the Zaccoose Creek Basin Plan. Then the Sahalli Stormwater Tightline Project, we're about at 10%. We do hope to go to construction this year. Two of the ongoing projects that we're involved with is the town center, particularly the regional stormwater proposal that you all heard about a little bit more yesterday. And then, of course, the East Lake Sammamish Trail. That's an ongoing activity and project. Here's a little bit of the near-term activity for the Zaccoose Creek. We are working with our consultants to submit the project for permit approvals on May 17th. We're then going to have a stakeholders meeting in June. Our schedule is to be at 60% design in August, 90%, and then have our second open house in November. That schedule is really determinant on the comments and the timeliness of the permitting agencies and the tribes.
Are you checking with Wally to make sure he's available for the stakeholders meeting?
We are. I know he likes to travel quite a bit, so we are trying to work around his schedule.
The open house is at his place.
And he's not there.
Cutting will definitely be on his place. And then the maintenance operations, I'll talk about the first one, and then I'll hand it back to Steve. This 811 utility locate service is a new requirement. So we actually have a full-time employee that responds to these 811 requests for locating all owners who have utilities in the particular project area needs to mark on the ground somewhere if they are sure that they have a utility, an underground utility. And we get, like it shows up there, 18 to 20 requests per day. Although I was looking at the last month's numbers, and they ranged anywhere from half a dozen to 55 in one day. So Chun Song is our inspector that takes care of these, and he's out there every day.
I will draw attention to this because this was something that we didn't realize we weren't doing. And so this was something that we really had to do because we had some severe liability if we did not take care of this. So this is something new that we did, and thank you, Public Works, for discovering this.
Lyman?
I say that sincerely.
Lyman, we called 811 before, which I have done. Who came?
It was not the city. It was each utility is responsible for their own. And we were not doing our utilities.
Yeah, but when you get a free location, they do more than just one utility. The guy that comes out and marks all the locations.
Well, the utilities, like the water or sorry, not water, I'm thinking like telephone and
Gas.
electrical, they may consolidate and have one locate service that's consolidated.
The wet utility providers usually mark their own, because they are then ultimately responsible for those.
We can't include Comcast into this when they have problems.
Well, Comcast would be another utility that would come out and mark theirs, yes.
And so not only is Chun doing this, he's also helping with the asset inventory, because if we go out and find more items, which still, as Cheryl mentioned, we don't have everything mapped, we can then add those to our inspection list, so then we can incorporate those into our system. So just jumping over to maintenance and ops a little bit, just for everybody's edification and education. 63 miles of sidewalks, 7 miles of bike lanes, 16,000 street trees, 204 lane miles of roadway, 25 signals, and 38 school zone flashing light systems. So until a month ago, Stephen got a lot of calls. Now he can at least separate those out. A little summary of this winter's excitement. So it was obviously very busy. That's a nice image from our camera system on Sahali Way. The crew plowed 4,320 miles of roadway. In case you're curious, it's only 3,300 miles to Miami. So I thought that was a pretty powerful. That gets you almost back to and back from Nashville. So I think that's 300 miles difference. So that's a lot of driving. 12,000 gallons of anti-ice air liquid applied. 300 cubic yards of storm debris was collected after the events, and then we activated 10 different times on a 24-hour shift for maintenance and operations. And we usually run those for 3 days, because to go 1 or 2 days, you really mess everybody's cycle up. So we try to go at least a couple days at a time. That has brought you to the end.
Do we have to extend the meeting time? Was it 10 o'clock that we?
Yeah.
Let's see, we've got the, how long do you think the executive session will take? Should we extend to 10:45, folks?
Yeah, that way we don't,
Yes.
yeah.
So moved.
I think we
Second.
try to do 10:30, but.
Well, but that way we don't have to extend again and waste more time.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Steve and Cheryl, thank you very much.
I do have one question. Do we really only have 7 miles of bike lanes?
I know, that seems low.
Well, East Lake Sammamish Parkway doesn't count because it's
Okay.
not marked there.
Those are marked bike lanes. We do have wider shoulders that people can.
Serve as bike lanes?
Right, right.
underneath. Okay, all right.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are now at council reports and committee reports. Let's start at my left. Councilmember Odell.
Well, it's been kind of a slack period because I was gone for 10 days, but I did attend the roundtable on city finances last week, along with, I think most of the council was there. In fact, it was kind of interesting because we had council, we had staff, we had a reporter, and I think the sum total of that outnumbered the citizens who were there as well. But still, it was a good discussion to have, and a lot of issues came out that I think will provide further grist for discussion at the financial retreat. I did attend the Kokanee Work Group meeting earlier this week, and Don, I'm going to leave you your report that you submitted to cover most of that. The quote-unquote release date is May 11th, and I put it in quotes because we're not releasing any fish this year because we don't have any. There are none that were captured for breeding, so it was a very poor return year. But they're still going to have the event because it's become a major education opportunity for the school districts who will be attending. City Manager Howard will be attending as the speaker with hopefully a relatively brief speech, Lyman. Good, excellent.
Size of a kokanee?
Maybe.
Fry.
There are a couple of issues that we may be asked to discuss again in the future. One is the movie, the video that's being worked on. There are a couple of cities that have not yet come to the trough on that. We may have to have a couple of council-to-council calls to energize that. The second thing is the trying to limit a biologist who's been seconded to the Kokanee Work Group. His funding runs out at the end of the year, I believe. And there will be an ask to keep him on the payroll for next year as well. And frankly, I think my recommendation would be to do that. I will be attending the Eastside Transportation Forum on Friday the 5th. Don, are you going to go to that?
No, I have conflict.
Okay, I will be going. And then lastly, I was taken pleasantly pleased this evening with the public thank yous that we got in the public comment period. We've had some public comments that have been, shall we say, a little less than comfortable in the past, some public comment periods. But tonight it was very interesting that we had three different groups, three different parties. Some were individuals, others were multiple. Come up and thank the staff and the city for taking a very positive role in resolving their issues. And I was pleased to hear that. And that's my report.
Good. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, following on that, despite discontent that citizens may have had with the manner and the format of the King County Parks presentation, as you heard today, Mr. Toski, and other citizens on the trail have come to me saying they've been very happy with how the city has been acting. The letter that they wrote in particular to the county, what they thought was an excellent letter, and they were very happy to see that and support from there. Yesterday, I guess it was, so long ago, we had the Citizens for Sammamish meeting. Several of the council members, Malchow, Gerund, and Hornish also attended that. It had two parts, looking at new development, and also we did a run-through on the Thrive Sammamish, and it seems to have been well received and prepped for coming here. Additionally, Eastside Fire and Rescue, again, we've passed those amendments now so that there's no surprises. And actually, I should thank Bob Keller because he was one of them who was pushing them to expedite the ILA and the next. And the next item that's up is going to be expansion of Eastside Fire and Rescue. So they're going to begin those discussions at our next meeting to look at the expansion. And as I understand, it's taking a more urgency because there's discussions that to our north, the cities may start to create their own joint fire department between cities, and they want to see how that would work together. Thank you.
Good. Councilmember Hornish.
Yes, I too attended the Finance Roundtable. I thought it was really good. I hope we can take out of that and get the virtual hall information and then coming up with a retreat. So I'm looking forward to that. I also, on Sunday, I attended the Mosque Neighborhood Barbecue, which was a great event. I thought it was very inclusive and very enjoyable with three other council members.
Okay.
So Valderrama, Jaron, and Keller.
Add those to my list.
Oh, yeah, I missed you. And then I've also signed up for an affordable housing luncheon by the Realtor Groups, which is an annual event. in Bellevue on the 6th of June that talks about affordable housing and how it can fit into the whole economic system, if you will. So looking forward to that.
Great. Deputy Mayor Keller.
And just a quick comment, I'll talk about this more actually next week as we get closer to it. I think every council member has received an email from me regarding the Hidden in Plain Sight program that's going to be, it's really being put on, it's sponsored by the Influence the Choice group, but the Sammamish Drug Free Coalition is actually supporting it and working or lending a hand and volunteers from that group at Inglewood Middle School. That's on Thursday, May 9th. And if you know, that's a exhibit that's being put up that is basically a display of a teenager's room. And the parents are going to be asked to go through this room. This is a parents-only event. They're going to be asked to go through the room and go through a checklist and see if they can identify any at-risk items that are in the room. And then there's a discussion, and there'll be a presentation after that. So we're hoping to get as much participation as possible. So all the council members, I would ask you, if you've seen that flyer for me, please pass it on to someone you think might attend.
But we can't attend.
You could attend if you'd like.
Parents only.
Well, it is for
My
parents.
kids are long
It's
gone.
really no kids.
Well,
It's really
well,
no
you're
kids.
still a parent, you know.
It's really the kids. That
Okay.
They don't need to teach the kids at risk.
They already know it.
Exactly.
They're the ones hiding it there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Malchow.
I'll keep this short and sweet. I thought it was worth bringing up the blocked culvert that we had on the consent agenda earlier today, which that caused $900,000 worth of damage. And not that it's, our job to go check culverts, but it's a nice reminder that if you see one that's blocked, it might be worth moving some of the debris out as you go along. Could be a huge cost savings along the line. I attended the Citizens for Sammamish meeting last night. I was at the Finance Roundtable, and I was curious, do we know when that will be online for the virtual town hall?
I believe it should be mid-May, mid to the end of May, I believe,
Okay, so soon.
very soon.
Okay. I was at the East Lake Sammamish Trail meeting as well, and the picnic on Sunday at the Sammamish Mosque as well.
Thank you. Ditto for picnic, Citizens for Sammamish. I did attend the North End Mayor's luncheon today up in Woodinville, and there was a presentation by Puget Sound Energy, and it's the Energize East Side. If you recall, last year we went on a tour, and we convinced them that they shouldn't do anything in Sammamish, they should do it in Bellevue.
Yeah.
And so,
We were unanimous on that.
yes. And so I thanked them for doing it in Bellevue, and the Bellevue mayor was there. What they're doing is upgrading a 115 kilovolt line to a 230 kilovolt line. And there is certainly community input on that. Somerset community and a couple other communities. Yes, it's shocking. So that was interesting. There was also discussion about the arts levy that the King County Council passed 7-2 yesterday. The consensus of the cities was, I would say, somewhat negative on that. The priorities, the vet and human service levy coming up in November. This arts levy is scheduled in August, but the levy amount to come up in November has to be determined by August 1st before you see how the arts levy gets voted on. And they're talking about increasing the vet and human service levy. So
And McCleary coming down,
Yeah,
and
so,
ST3 property taxes now.
so the
King County Council passed this?
yes.
Yeah, they did. Did Kathy vote against it?
No, actually, she voted for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Before she was opposed to it because of roads.
Well, we shouldn't have gone to her breakfast this morning.
I want that back.
Yeah. So that's my report, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. I've got three items. First of which is the 2016 impact fee report. You have at the dais, and I'm just going to make mention of it. If you'd like to review it, it's a requirement by the state of Washington that we report annually to the council, so I will just point that out to you. If you have any questions, please let me know, or better yet, Finance Director Aaron Anton. But we have that for you to look at. AWC voting members, the last regular meeting we had talked, and I believe the mayor and Councilmember Valderrama are going to be in attendance. And there was some discussion as to who else might be there. We were going to check with Councilmember Odell, but he is going to be at the National League of Cities. So we need a third delegate for a third vote on that. So that is the week of...
Councilmember Keller was attending. You're not attending?
Well, Councilmember Keller said that he might attend,
Okay.
but dependent on
Wanted to
other
say if
other
the
council
other,
members.
yeah, if other council members would like to attend, if we need a third person there, so somebody needs to go. So I wanted to see if there was someone else that wanted to go.
When is it again?
It's in Olympia. Excuse me, not Olympia, it's in Vancouver.
Vancouver.
June 21st.
Yeah.
It starts, I believe, the first full day is June 21st and goes through the end of the week. I believe the
Wednesday,
meeting,
Thursday,
I
Friday.
believe the vote, or the General Assembly meeting
Friday
is
afternoon.
Friday afternoon.
So I'm there the whole week because I've got a couple of committee assignments.
That'd be tough for me to be down there.
Okay. All right. Then if the scheduling purposes, I'll work it out and I'll be there because I think we need the representation.
Great,
Great.
thank you. I guess at that point, so we have a head nod on our three delegates then?
So
Yes.
Romero, myself, and Bob.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
great, thank you
And we
very
know
much.
who to vote for.
Exactly.
Okay, and then lastly, given that week is AWC and also National League of Cities, we may have an issue Tuesday night, having a council meeting. So I am wondering if it might behoove us to shift that meeting on June 20th to June 27th. I would anticipate that most people will be here the week of June 27th because the 29th is our financial retreat. So
I'm fine with that.
work for everybody, that'd be great.
Works with me.
Yep. Great, we will reschedule that. And that is it for my report. And I think next would be a brief executive session.
I had one question when I was reading the minutes. We were going to get an update on the Pine Lake Fire Station. Do you know when you will be able to get that explanation or understanding?
We just received some information from the city attorney's office, and I'd be happy to bring that back at the next meeting.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
But Don had a pretty good email.
Yeah. Okay, so we have an executive session, potential litigation pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I, and potential land acquisition pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1B, and it'll be perhaps 10 or 15 minutes?
10 or 15 minutes, and you may take action.
May take action.
That mean we're up?
5 Mississippi. Okay, we're back in session. We have a motion.
We do. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to authorize the city manager to purchase portions of real property on parcels numbered 124070-0093 in the amount of $25,800 plus additional closing cost and 332506 tract TRACT in the amount of $51,770 plus associated closing costs for the purpose of the Southeast 4th Street Project Road right-of-way.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote of 6-0, it is approved. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
That is it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.